I was
There's
sitting in the
something in
living room
life
watching TV when
that
my
you
daughter-in-law
really
walked in,
have to
grabbed the
learn
remote from
how
the
to
coffee
deal with,
table, and turned it off
and
without
that's
saying a word.
change.
The screen went black, cutting off the jazz documentary I had been waiting all week to see. She tossed the remote onto the sofa cushion next to me and sighed as if my mere existence was exhausting her. "Go to your room, old man," she snapped, unrolling a purple yoga mat on the hardwood floor. "This is my space now. I need to center myself before the girls arrive, and you are messing up the chi." I looked over at my son Trey, who was standing in the kitchen doorway holding a bottle of water. He saw everything. He heard the disrespect in her voice, but he just looked away, focusing intensely on the label of his water bottle. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, grabbed my keys, and walked out the front door. They thought I was just a senile old man sulking. They had no idea that when I walked out that door, I was initiating a sequence of events that would leave them homeless. The next day, a man in a black suit rang the doorbell, and the look on her face when he handed her the envelope was worth every second of my silence. "My name is Silas Montgomery. I am 70 years old, and if you saw me walking down the street in my faded flannel shirt and my work boots that have seen better days, you would probably think I was a gardener or a retired mechanic struggling to get by on Social Security. That is exactly what my daughter-in-law Paige thinks. She thinks I am a burden. She thinks I am a washed-up old man who failed at life and now has to leech off his successful son just to have a roof over his head. She calls me old man more often than she calls me by my name. She rolls her eyes when I heat up my leftovers in the microwave. She treats me like a stain on her perfect curated life in the upscale suburbs of Atlanta. What Paige does not know, and what my son Trey has conveniently forgotten, is that I am the founder and majority shareholder of Montgomery Logistics. I built a trucking empire from a single secondhand van back in the 70s into a fleet that moves freight across 48 states. I didn't retire because I was tired or broke. I stepped back from the daily operations because I wanted to see if my son could handle the weight of the legacy without me holding his hand every step of the way. I wanted to see if he was a man of character. I moved into this house, a sprawling 5-bedroom estate in Buckhead, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I wanted to be close to family after my wife Bee passed away. I wanted to see my grandchildren grow up if they ever decided to have any. I wanted to rest. But rest is hard to come by when you are living with a woman who hates the sight of you. It was a Tuesday evening, raining hard outside, the kind of Atlanta rain that turns the sky a bruised purple. I was sitting in the leather armchair in the corner of the living room. It was my chair, or at least it used to be. It was the only piece of furniture I had brought from my old house, a worn, comfortable thing that smelled like tobacco and old books. Paige hated it. She had tried to throw it out twice, claiming it clashed with her modern beige aesthetic, but Trey had managed to grow a spine just long enough to insist it stay. I was watching a documentary about Thelonious Monk. Jazz was my sanctuary. It was the music Bee and I used to dance to in our kitchen when we didn't have 2 dimes to rub together. Watching the old footage, seeing the smoke-filled clubs of the past, it made me feel close to her. I had the volume low, respectful of the house, just a hum of piano and brass filling the corner. I was at peace. Then the front door slammed open. Paige blew in like a hurricane, dripping wet and already angry. She kicked off her expensive heels, leaving them right in the middle of the hallway, and marched into the living room. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't even look at me. She just walked straight to the coffee table, snatched the remote, and pressed the power button. The music died. The screen went black. The room was suddenly filled with a heavy, suffocating silence. I blinked, adjusting to the sudden lack of light and sound. I looked up at her. She was standing there with her hands on her hips, wearing that expression of permanent annoyance she reserved specifically for me. "I was watching that page," I said, keeping my voice level. "It is a special on Monk. It only airs once." She let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Oh, please. It is just noise, Silas. It sounds like a cat walking on a piano. I have had the most stressful day imaginable. The caterer for my brunch messed up the order and my yoga instructor canceled. I need to decompress. I need silence." She tossed the remote onto the sofa far out of my reach and began moving the coffee table with a loud screech of wood against wood. "You have a TV in your room," she said, not looking at me as she unrolled her yoga mat. "Go watch your noise in there." My room was the guest room on the first floor. It was small, cramped, and the TV in there was an old monitor that barely picked up local channels, let alone the cable package I paid for. Yes, I paid for it, just like I paid for the internet she was using to stream her meditation music, just like I paid for the electricity keeping the lights on. But she didn't know that. She thought Trey paid for everything. Paige, I said, trying to maintain my dignity. This is the living room. It is a common area. I have been sitting here quietly all afternoon. She whipped around, her eyes flashing. Common area. You think this is a democracy, Silas? This is my house. I decorate it, I clean it, I manage it. You are just a guest here, a guest who has overstayed his welcome by about 6 months. I felt a tightening in my chest. Not a heart attack, but the burning heat of suppressed rage. My house. She called it her house. I looked toward the kitchen. Trey was standing there. He had just walked in from the garage, still wearing his suit from work. He looked tired, beaten down. He held a bottle of water in his hand, condensation dripping onto his expensive shoes. He saw us. He saw his wife standing over his seated father, pointing a finger at the door. He heard her call me a guest in a home that I had bought with a cashier's check 3 years ago. Trey, I said, my voice calm but hard. Are you going to say anything? Trey looked at Paige, then he looked at me. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He weighed the cost of defending me against the cost of arguing with her. He chose the path of the least resistance. He chose cowardice. Dad, he muttered, looking down at his water. Just let her have the room, okay? She is stressed. Just go to your room. It is not a big deal. It is not a big deal. Those words cut deeper than anything Paige could have screamed. My son, the boy I had put through private schools, the man I had secretly positioned to take over a multi-million-dollar company, was dismissing me like a naughty child. Paige smirked, a triumphant, ugly little smile. See, even your son agrees. You are in the way. Go on, get out. I stood up slowly. My knees popped, a reminder of the 40 years I had spent climbing in and out of truck cabs, loading freight, and building a legacy. I looked at Paige, really looked at her. I looked at the designer leggings she wore, paid for by the credit card I paid off every month. I looked at the vase on the mantelpiece behind her. It was a Ming Dynasty replica, or so she thought. She had bought it at an auction 6 months ago, bragging to her friends that she had stolen it for $5,000. She didn't know that I was the seller. She didn't know I had instructed the auction house to drive the price up just to see how much of my money she was willing to waste, only to let her win it. It was a fake. I had bought it at a flea market for $20 in 1995. It sat there on the mantel, a shiny, hollow lie, just like her life. You should be careful with that vase, Paige, I said, my voice low. It is very fragile. Things that look expensive are often worth nothing at all. She frowned, confused by the non sequitur. What are you babbling about, Go? I looked at Trey one last time. He refused to meet my gaze. He was busy typing on his phone, hiding in the digital world to avoid the reality of his moral failure. I walked past them. I didn't stomp. I didn't slam the door. I walked with the heavy, measured tread of a man who knows exactly where he is going. I walked down the hallway to the small guest room they had allotted to me. The room was sparse. A twin bed, a dresser that smelled of mothballs, and a small closet where my few flannel shirts hung. It looked like the room of a man who had nothing. But looks, as I have learned over 70 years, are the most deceiving thing on God's green earth. I closed the door and locked it. I didn't turn on the old TV. I didn't sit on the bed and cry. I knelt down and reached under the bed. I pulled out a small fireproof lockbox. I dialed the combination. Click, click, click. The lid popped open. Inside, there was no money. I didn't keep cash here. Inside was a single old-fashioned flip phone and a thick leather ledger. This was my command center. This was the only link to the world where I wasn't Silas the moocher, but Silas Montgomery, the man who could shut down shipping lanes from Savannah to Seattle with a single phone call. I picked up the flip phone. It was charged. It was always charged. I scrolled through the contacts. There was only one number saved. I pressed the call button and held it to my ear. It rang once. Mr. Montgomery, a voice answered. Crisp, efficient, dangerous. It was Mr. Blackwood, my personal attorney. A man who cost more per hour than Trey made in a month. A man who didn't know the meaning of the word mercy. Blackwood, I said. My voice was different now. The waver of the old man was gone. It was replaced by the steel of the CEO. I am listening, Sir Blackwood replied. We are activating the contingency plan, I said. Phase 1. There was a pause on the other end. A pause of understanding. Has the situation become untenable, sir? They turned off my music, Blackwood, I said, looking at the closed door of my bedroom. They turned off the music and my son looked away. Understood, Blackwood said. His tone shifted from advisor to executioner. I have the files ready. Do you want to proceed with the eviction notice first or the asset freeze? No, I said. I want to look them in the eye when it happens. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. Come to the house. And Blackwood. Yes, sir, wear the good suit. I want them to know this is official. I will be there, sir. I hung up the phone and placed it back in the box. I sat on the edge of the twin bed and listened. Out in the living room, I could hear the soft ambient sounds of Paige's meditation music. She was out there stretching, breathing, feeling like the queen of her castle. She thought she had won. She thought she had banished the old man to the shadows. She didn't know that the shadows were where I did my best work. I lay back on the pillow staring at the ceiling. I didn't sleep. I thought about B. I thought about how we had built this empire so our son would never have to struggle like we did. I thought about where I went wrong. I had given him too much. I had shielded him from the rain so often that he never learned how to build a shelter. I had created a weak man who married a cruel woman, and now I had to be the storm. I closed my eyes, but my mind was already racing through the inventory of assets. The deed to this house was in a holding company called SM Trust. I was the sole trustee. The cars in the driveway, the shiny BMW Paige drove, and the Range Rover Trey took to work were leased through a subsidiary of my logistics firm. The credit cards they swiped so freely were supplemental cards linked to my private equity account. They owned nothing. Absolutely nothing. They were tenants in a life I was subsidizing, and they had just evicted their landlord. The next morning, the house was quiet. I woke up at 5 a.m. as I always did. I dressed in my usual clothes, a clean plaid shirt, my suspenders, my work pants. I didn't want to tip them off yet. I wanted the contrast to be sharp. I walked into the kitchen. Paige was already there drinking a green smoothie. She looked at me with a sneer. "Oh, you are still here," she asked. "I thought maybe you had run away to the circus." I poured myself a cup of black coffee. "Not yet, Paige. I have some business to attend to today." "Business?" She laughed. "What business? Collecting coupons at the grocery store?" "Something like that," I said. Trey walked in looking hungover and miserable. He didn't look at me. He grabbed a bagel and headed for the door. "Bye, honey. Bye, Dad." He mumbled the last part as if it pained him. I waited. I sat on the porch in my rocking chair watching the street. The neighborhood was quiet. Manicured lawns, sprinkler systems, hissing the smell of jasmine in the air. It was a perfect facade. At exactly 9:59, a black sedan turned the corner. It wasn't just any car. It was a Maybach, sleek and menacing like a shark in a swimming pool. It rolled silently down the street and stopped right in front of our driveway. Paige came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Who is that?" she asked, squinting. "Is Trey expecting clients?" I didn't answer. I just took a sip of my coffee. The rear door of the Maybach opened. Mr. Blackwood stepped out. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a charcoal three-piece suit that cost more than Paige's entire wedding. He adjusted his cufflinks, picked up a thick leather briefcase, and walked up the driveway. He didn't look at Paige. He looked straight at me. He walked up the steps, ignored Paige's confused sputtering, and stopped in front of my chair. "Good morning, Mr. Montgomery," Blackwood said, his voice carrying across the lawn. "Good morning, Blackwood," I replied, not standing up. Paige looked between us, her face twisting in confusion. "Excuse me, who are you, and why are you talking to the gardener?" Blackwood turned to her slowly. He looked her up and down with the clinical detachment of a coroner examining a corpse. "I am not talking to the gardener," Madam Blackwood said, handing her a thick red envelope. "I am speaking to the owner of this property, and I am here to serve you with an immediate notice of eviction." Paige froze. The envelope shook in her hand. What she whispered. "Run," I thought, taking another sip of coffee. But it was already too late to run. The man had shown up. I was pouring my second cup of coffee in the garage when the door to the house swung open. It was a Saturday morning, the kind that usually promised quiet, but the air was already thick with the scent of expensive perfume and the loud, booming voice of a man who loved the sound of his own opinions. A massive RV the size of a city bus and painted a pearlescent cream was idling in the driveway, blocking my old Ford truck. I hadn't heard it pull up over the sound of my own thoughts, but there was no missing it now. Paige came running into the garage wearing a silk robe that I knew cost more than my monthly food budget. She didn't look at me. She looked past me, toward the driveway. "They are here?" she squealed, clapping her hands. "Trey, get down here. Mom and Dad are here." Trey shuffled in behind her, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He looked at me, then at the floor, offering a weak, apologetic grimace before putting on a fake smile for his wife. I stayed by my workbench holding my mug. The Hendersons, Paige's parents. They lived in Florida and usually only visited once a year to remind everyone how wealthy and important they were. But they had never brought the bus before. The side door of the RV hissed open, and out stepped Bob and Joyce Henderson. Bob was a large man, soft in the middle, wearing a pastel polo shirt and boat shoes despite the autumn chill. Joyce was a woman held together by hairspray and gold jewelry, her face frozen in a permanent expression of judgment. "Oh, my babies!" Joyce cried out, extending her arms. Paige ran to her and they embraced in a cloud of floral scent that instantly made the garage smell like a funeral home. "Good to see you, son," Bob boomed, slapping Trey on the back hard enough to make him stumble. I stood there invisible in my own home. I was wearing my usual Saturday clothes, a faded flannel shirt, comfortable work pants, and my old boots. I looked like what I was, a man who liked to work with his hands. Bob finally turned his gaze toward the corner of the garage. He squinted at me, looking me up and down with open disdain. "Oh, hey," Bob said, pointing a finger at me. "Trey is the gardener waiting for a check. You should tell him to use the side door next time. We don't want mud on the new carpet." The silence that followed was absolute. Paige let out a little giggle, covering her mouth as if it were a cute mistake. That's my dad," Bob Trey stammered, his face flushing red. "That's Silas." Bob didn't look embarrassed. He looked disappointed. "Oh, right, the father. Sorry about that, Silas. You look like you just came in from mowing the lawn." I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just looked at him. "I mow my own lawn, Henderson," I said, my voice low and steady. "It keeps a man honest." Bob laughed, a loud barking sound. "Honest? That's cute. Well, don't let us interrupt your whatever you're doing." Paige clapped her hands again, drawing the attention back to herself. "Okay, everyone, listen up. Mom and Dad have a surprise." "We are staying," Joyce announced, beaming. "Our condo in Boca is being renovated. Total gut job, Italian marble everywhere, so we need a place to crash for a while." "How long is a while?" I asked. 2 months, Paige said quickly, still not looking me in the eye. "Maybe 3. 2 months. In my house. And that brings me to the logistics." Paige continued, her voice taking on that sharp command tone she used when she was about to demand something unreasonable. "We need space. The guest room upstairs is full of my yoga equipment and the office is Trey's workspace. So Mom and Dad are going to take the downstairs suite. The downstairs suite was my room. It was the room I had been exiled to the night before. It was the only space in this massive house that felt remotely like mine. "Wait a minute," I said. "That is my room." "Not anymore," Paige snapped. "It is the biggest guest room. It has the ensuite bathroom and the view of the garden. My parents are not going to share a bathroom down the hall like college students. They need privacy and comfort." "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked. Paige shrugged, waving a hand toward the back of the garage. "The garage has that finished area in the back. It's heated. We can put a cot in there. It is just for sleeping, Silas. You are barely here anyway." The garage. She was moving me to the garage like an old lawnmower she didn't know how to use but didn't want to throw away yet. "Trey," I said, looking at my son. "Are you hearing this?" Trey rubbed the back of his neck, looking anywhere but at me. "Dad, it is just temporary. The Hendersons are guests. We have to be hospitable. And the garage isn't that bad. I mean, it is insulated." I looked at my son. I looked at the man I had raised to be strong, to be a leader, and I saw a coward. "Fine," I said. "I will move," Great Paige said. "Let's get it done now. The movers are bringing in the rest of Mom's wardrobe in an hour, and I want the room clean." She marched down the hallway to my room, her parents trailing behind her like royalty inspecting a new colony. I followed them. Paige threw open the door to my room. "Ugh," she said, wrinkling her nose. "It smells like old spice and dust in here. We need to air this out." She walked over to my dresser. My things were arranged neatly, photos of B, my watch collection, a few books. She started sweeping them into a pile with her arm. "Here," she said to Trey, who had followed us. "Grab some trash bags from the kitchen. We can just dump all this stuff in there and carry it out. It will be faster." Trash bags, my life, my memories, into trash bags. Trey hesitated. Paige, maybe we should use boxes. Boxes take too long, she hissed. Just get the bags, Trey. Don't make this difficult. Trey went to the kitchen. He came back with a roll of heavy-duty black garbage bags. He handed one to Paige and took one for himself. They started grabbing my clothes from the closet, my Sunday suits, my flannel shirts, my work boots. They stuffed them into the bags like they were clearing out debris after a flood. Careful with that, I said as Paige grabbed a stack of vinyl records from the shelf. Those are original pressings. B gave me that Coltrane album for our 10th anniversary. Paige looked at the album cover. It was old. The cardboard was worn at the edges. It looks like mold, she said. I don't want mold spores in the house with my parents. Their immune systems are delicate. She tossed the record into the bag. I heard the vinyl crack. That sound was like a bone breaking in my own body. I took a step forward, my hands balling into fists. Don't touch her things, I said, my voice dropping to a growl. Bob Henderson stepped in front of me. He put a soft, heavy hand on my chest. Easy there, old-timer, he said, smiling that condescending smile. Let the kids handle it. You just relax. Go check on the garden or something. I looked at his hand on my chest. I thought about breaking his fingers. I knew exactly how much pressure it would take. But I stopped. I remembered Mr. Blackwood. I remembered the plan. If I hit him, I was the aggressor. If I hit him, I was the violent old man who needed to be put away. I stepped back. I let them do it. I watched them strip the room. They took the sheets off the bed and threw them in a pile in the hall. They took my books and dumped them into a box so carelessly that the covers bent. Then Paige went for the nightstand. On the nightstand sat a small wooden truck. It was hand-carved. The paint was chipped. It was a model of a 1974 Mack truck. The first truck I ever bought. The truck I drove 18 hours a day for 5 years to build the capital for the second one. That little piece of wood was the seed of an empire that generated $60 million in revenue last year. Paige picked it up. She held it by one wheel. What is this junk, she asked. It looks like a child's toy. Bob Henderson chuckled. Did you make that in shop class? Trey looked at the truck. He knew what it was. He knew I had carved it myself during the long waits at loading docks. He knew it was the only thing I had kept from those early days. It is just something of Dad's. Trey mumbled. Well, it is. Gathering dust, Paige said. She tossed it toward the open garbage bag Trey was holding. She missed. The wooden truck hit the floor with a clatter. A wheel broke off and rolled under the bed. I stared at the broken truck. I stared at the wheel lying in the dust bunnies. Oops, Paige said, her voice flat. No emotion, no apology. Well, it was broken anyway. Toss it, Trey. I moved then. I moved faster than they expected an old man to move. I knelt down and picked up the truck. I reached under the bed and retrieved the wheel. I stood up and held the pieces in my hand. I will take this, I said. Suit yourself, Paige said, turning back to the closet. Just get the rest of this junk out of here. My mom needs to rest. I walked out of the room. I walked past Bob Henderson, who was inspecting the crown molding with a critical eye. I walked past Mrs. Henderson, who was complaining about the humidity. I walked out the side door and into the garage. The garage was cold. The concrete floor was stained with oil from Trey's Range Rover. There was a smell of gasoline and damp cardboard. In the corner there was a folding cot that looked like it had been salvaged from a surplus store. A thin, stained mattress lay on top of it. There were no blankets. This was my new home. Trey came into the garage a few minutes later dragging 2 of the black garbage bags. He dropped them on the floor. They landed with a heavy thud. Sorry, Dad, he said, not meeting my eyes. He wiped his hands on his pants as if touching my things had made him dirty. We will make it nice in here. I will bring out a space heater later. Just leave it, Trey, I said. I was sitting on the edge of the cot holding the broken wooden truck. He lingered for a second. Look, Bob and Joyce, they are specific, you know. They like things a certain way. Just try not to get in their way. Okay? It will make things easier for everyone. Easier for everyone. That was Trey's motto. He would let the world burn as long as he did not have to hold the match. Go inside, Trey, I said. Your mother-in-law probably needs her pillows fluffed. He winced, but he left. He closed the door between the house and the garage. I heard the lock click. They locked the door. They locked me out of my own house. I sat there in the dim light. I looked at the black plastic bags that held my life. I looked at the broken truck in my hands. Mr. Henderson had called it a child's toy. He had laughed at it. He did not know that this child's toy represented a fleet of 400 trucks. He did not know that this toy represented 3 distribution centers in strategic locations across the Southeast. He did not know that this toy was the physical manifestation of a fortune that could buy and sell his precious Florida condo 100 times over. I put the wheel back on the axle. It fit loosely. I would need some glue to fix it. I looked around the garage. I saw my tools hanging on the pegboard. My real tools, not the shiny, useless set Trey had bought for show. My wrenches, my screwdrivers, my hammers. I stood up. I walked over to the workbench. I cleared a space. I set the truck down gently. "You think I am the gardener Henderson?" I whispered to the empty garage. "You think I am just the help?" I opened the top drawer of the workbench. Inside, tucked behind a box of spark plugs, was a spare key to the house. They thought locking the door would keep me out. They forgot who built the shelves in this garage. They forgot who installed the locks. I took the key. I put it in my pocket. I was not going to storm back in there. Not yet. I was going to let them get comfortable. I was going to let them think they had won. I pulled my phone from my pocket. The old flip phone. I opened it. I dialed Blackwood's number again. Sir Blackwood answered on the first ring. "Add a clause to the eviction notice," I said. My voice was steady, cold. "What clause, sir?" "Damages," I said. "I want a full assessment of damages to personal property, specifically a vintage vinyl collection and a handcrafted wooden prototype." "Understood," Blackwood said. "Is there anything else?" "Yes," I said. "Check the ownership of the Hendersons' condo in Boca." "Sir, just check it," I said. "I want to know who holds the mortgage. I want to know if they are late on payments. I want to know everything. I will have a report within the hour." I hung up. I looked at the door to the house. I could hear muffled laughter coming from inside. They were celebrating. They were probably drinking my wine. They were probably sitting on my furniture talking about how generous they were for letting the old man sleep in the garage. Enjoy it, I thought. Enjoy the champagne, because tomorrow you are going to be drinking tap water. It was 6 p.m. when the door to the garage flew open and hit the concrete wall with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. I was sitting on the edge of the cot trying to read a newspaper by the dim light of a single hanging bulb. The garage was cold and smelled of gasoline and damp cardboard, but it was the only sanctuary I had left. Paige stood in the doorway holding a plastic garment bag. She did not enter. She stood on the threshold as if the air in the garage might contaminate her. "Put this on," she said, tossing the bag onto the dirty floor at my feet. "We are having a formal dinner to welcome my parents properly, and the catering service is short-staffed. You are going to help." I looked at the bag on the floor, then up at her. "I am not a waiter, Paige," I said, my voice raspy from lack of use. "I am a retired man living in his own home." She laughed, a short, sharp sound that had no humor in it. "You are living in my garage, Silas. You are eating my food and using my electricity. If you want to stay here, you need to be useful. I need someone to pour the wine and clear the plates. Unless you have $1,000 for rent handy, this is how you pay your way tonight." She turned and walked back into the warmth of the house, leaving the door open just long enough for me to smell the roast beef cooking in the kitchen. My roast beef, bought with the credit card I paid off every month. I unzipped the bag. Inside was an old black vest and a white shirt that had turned yellow around the collar. It was a uniform I had not seen in 40 years. It belonged to a time when I worked 2 jobs to put food on the table for Trey and B. Paige must have dug it out of the deepest corner of the attic just to humiliate me. I put it on. The shirt was tight across the shoulders. The vest buttons barely closed over my chest. I looked in the reflection of the truck window. I did not look like Silas Montgomery, the founder of a logistics empire. I looked like an old servant who had fallen on hard times. I looked exactly how she wanted me to look. Broken. I walked into the house. The dining room was transformed. The good china B had collected piece by piece over 30 years was laid out on the long mahogany table. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. Candles flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. It looked like a scene from a movie about people who had more money than sense. Bob and Joyce Henderson were already seated. Bob was wearing a blazer that looked like it cost more than my first car. Joyce was dripping in gold jewelry that clinked every time she moved her hand. Trey was sitting at the head of the table where I used to sit. He looked small in the big chair. When he saw me enter in the tight vest, he looked down at his plate, his face flushing a deep, shame-filled red. Ah, the help has arrived, Bob boomed, raising his empty glass. I will start with the Cabernet Silas. And do try not to spill it. This is an Italian import and it stains like the devil. I walked over to the sideboard where the wine bottles stood. I picked up the bottle. It was a heavy, expensive vintage from my own private cellar. A bottle I had been saving for Trey's 10th wedding anniversary. Now I was pouring it for a man who thought I was the help. I moved around the table filling glasses. My hand was steady despite the rage burning in my gut. I served Joyce first, then Paige, then Bob. When I got to Trey, he put his hand over his glass. No, thanks, Dad, he mumbled. Pour it, Silas, Paige snapped. It is a celebration. Don not be rude, Trey. Your father is working. Let him do his job. Trey moved his hand. I poured the wine. The dark red liquid swirled in the glass. I wanted to smash the bottle against the wall. I wanted to scream that I owned the table they were sitting at and the roof over their heads. But I stayed silent. I retreated to the corner of the room, standing with my hands clasped behind my back, just like a good servant. The dinner conversation was a torture designed specifically for me. They talked about money. They talked about status. They talked about how wonderful Trey was for providing this lifestyle. This roast is perfection, Joyce said, chewing with her mouth open. Trey, you have done so well for yourself. A house in Buckhead, a beautiful wife. You must be making a fortune at that firm. Trey shifted in his seat. We are doing okay, Mom. The market is good right now. Doing okay, Paige interrupted. He is doing fantastic. He is the top earner in his division. He has the killer instinct. He knows how to close a deal. She looked at me standing in the shadows, her eyes gleaming with malice. It is a good thing he takes after me, she said loudly. Thank God Trey adopted my family work ethic, because if he took after his father, we would be living in a rental. Bob laughed, slamming his hand on the table. You got that right, sweetheart. Ambition is genetic. Some people have it, and some people are just born to be support staff. He gestured vaguely in my direction with his fork. No offense, Silas, but look at you. You are 70 years old, and you are pouring wine in your sun house. That is what happens when you do not have drive. That is what happens when you settle for mediocrity. I felt the blood rushing in my ears. Mediocrity. I had built a company from a single truck. I had navigated recessions, fuel crises, and union strikes. I had employed hundreds of people. I had created wealth that Bob Henderson could only dream of. And here I was listening to a man who lived off his wife's inheritance lecture me about drive. Trey said nothing. He cut his meat. He drank his wine. He let them insult me. He let them erase me. Paige continued her assault. It is sad, really. Silas never planned for the future. He just drifted through life expecting handouts. That is why he is here. He has nowhere else to go. He is a burden on us, but we are too kind to throw him out on the street. We are saints, really. Saints. The word echoed in my head. More wine, Silas, Bob demanded, holding up his glass without looking at me. I walked over to the table. My legs felt heavy. The room seemed to be shrinking. The heat from the candles was suffocating. I reached for the bottle. My hand was trembling now, not from age, not from weakness, from a fury so intense it felt like it was melting my bones. I approached Bob. I leaned in to pour. You missed a spot, Joyce said, pointing a manicured finger at a crumb on the tablecloth. You really are not very good at this, are you, Silas? My focus wavered. I looked at her sharp, cruel face. In that split second, the bottle tilted too far. A stream of red wine missed the glass. It splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth, spreading like a fresh wound. A few drops hit Bob's sleeve. Bob jumped up, knocking his chair back. Hey, watch what you are doing, you idiot. This is silk. Paige was on her feet in an instant. Her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. She did not look like a beautiful young woman anymore. She looked like a monster. You clumsy old fool, she screamed. Look what you did. You ruined the table. You ruined the dinner. I stood there, the bottle still in my hand. I am sorry, I said. The words tasted like ash. It was an accident. Accident nothing, she yelled, coming around the table. You did that on purpose. You are jealous. You are jealous because we have everything and you have nothing. You are just a bitter, useless old man. She reached me. She put her hands on my chest, right on the tight fabric of the old vest. And she pushed. It was not a gentle shove. It was a violent, aggressive push meant to hurt. I was not expecting it. I stumbled backward. My heel caught on the edge of the rug. I fell hard. My back hit the sideboard and I slid to the floor, the wine bottle slipping from my grasp and shattering on the hardwood. Red wine pooled around me, soaking into the old vest. I sat there, stunned. My daughter-in-law had just physically assaulted me. The room went silent. Bob was wiping his sleeve with a napkin, muttering curses. Joyce was looking at me with disgust, as if I were a dog that had made a mess on the carpet. But it was Trey's reaction that broke me. He stood up slowly. He looked at his wife, panting with rage. He looked at his in-laws, looking inconvenienced. And then he looked at me, his father sitting in a puddle of wine and broken glass. "Dad," he said, his voice shaking. I looked up at him, hoping that this was the line, hoping that seeing his father on the floor would finally wake him up. "Dad, please," he said, closing his eyes. "Just get out. Get out of my sight. You are ruining everything." He did not help me up. He did not yell at his wife for pushing an old man. He told me to leave. I gripped the edge of the sideboard and pulled myself up. My knees ached. My dignity was in shreds on the floor. I looked at Paige. She was breathing hard, adjusting her dress, looking triumphant. I looked at Bob and Joyce, who were already turning back to their meal as if I had ceased to exist. And I looked at Trey, my son, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had sat up with when he had fevers, the boy I had built an empire for. "I am leaving," I said quietly. My voice was steady. It was the calm before the storm. I took off the vest. I unbuttoned it with shaking hands and let it drop into the wine puddle. I took off the white shirt, leaving me in my undershirt. I did not care. I walked to the door. "Make sure you clean this mess up before you go to sleep," Paige called after me. "I do not want ants." I did not answer. I walked out of the dining room. I walked through the kitchen. I walked out into the garage. I stood in the cold air, breathing heavily. My hands were fists. I went to the cot and sat down. I reached under the mattress and pulled out my phone. I dialed Blackwood's number. It was late, but I knew he would answer. Mr. Montgomery Blackwood's voice was crisp, instantly alert. "Phase 2, I said. My voice sounded dead even to my own ears. Sir Blackwood said, a note of concern in his tone. "Are you sure Phase 2 is aggressive?" "They pushed me, Blackwood," I said, looking at the door to the house. "She put her hands on me and she pushed me down. And my son told me to get out of his sight." There was a silence on the line, a silence of cold professional fury. "I understand," Sir Blackwood said. "I will alert the security team. Do you want police involvement for the assault?" "No," I said. "Police is too easy. I want them to feel it. I want them to lose everything before they even know the game has started." "Understood, Blackwood," I said. "Yes, sir. Cut the power," I said. "Cut the water, cut the gas, and cancel the cards. All of them. Even the emergency one. Tonight, sir. Right now," I said. "Let them eat their roast beef in the dark." I hung up the phone. I sat in the dark garage waiting. 5 minutes later, the lights in the house flickered and died. The music stopped. The hum of the refrigerator ceased. Then came the screams. I lay back on the cot and closed my eyes. The floor was hard and the air was cold, but for the first time in months I felt warm. The man was coming, and he was bringing hell with him. I woke up because I could no longer feel my toes. The cold had seeped through the thin walls of the garage during the night, settling into the concrete floor and rising up through the thin mattress of the cot like a rising tide. I lay there for a moment, staring at the oil stains on the ceiling, trying to flex my hands to get the blood moving. My breath hung in the air in little white puffs. It was Sunday morning. A day that used to mean pancakes and jazz records and reading the paper in the sun. Now it meant waking up in a storage room that smelled of gasoline and neglect. I sat up and my spine cracked a sound like dry twigs snapping. I was 70 years old and I had spent the night sleeping in a room designed for cars, not humans. I reached for my flannel shirt, which I had folded on top of a cardboard box, and put it on, buttoning it all the way to the top. It was damp. Everything in here was damp. The door to the house opened. I didn't flinch. I was getting used to the sudden intrusions. Paige stepped into the garage. She was wearing a thick cashmere sweater and holding a steaming mug of coffee. She looked warm. She looked comfortable. She looked like she had slept in a bed with high thread count sheets while I shivered on a cot. She didn't say good morning. She didn't ask if I was cold. She walked over to the workbench where I had set up my small station of belongings and slapped a piece of paper down on the wood. "Read it," she said, taking a sip of her coffee. I stood up slowly, fighting the stiffness in my knees. I walked over to the workbench. The paper was crisp and white, printed on high-quality stock. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Residential Lease Agreement." I looked at her. "What is this, Paige?" "It is a contract," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. Trey and I talked about it last night. After the stunt you pulled with the power, we realized that this arrangement isn't working. You are a drain on our resources, Silas. You use the water, you use the heat, even though you apparently like to sabotage the breaker box and you occupy valuable square footage. Nothing in life is free. I looked down at the paper. I scanned the terms. My eyes widened. $1,200, I said. You want to charge me $1,200 a month to sleep in a garage? It is competitive, she said, shrugging. Studio apartments in this zip code go for $1,500. We are giving you a family discount. Plus, it includes utilities, assuming you don't cut them off again. I looked at the number. $1,200. That was more than my Social Security check. She knew that. She knew exactly what my fixed income looked like because she had opened my mail 3 months ago claiming it was an accident. She was setting a price she knew I couldn't pay. This wasn't a lease. It was an eviction notice dressed up as business. I don't have $1,200, Paige, I said quietly. She smiled, a tight, thin curving of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. Well, then you have a problem, don't you? You have until the first of the month to come up with the money or you vacate the premises. There are plenty of state-run facilities that take indigent seniors. I am sure you would fit right in. She turned to leave, but stopped at the door as if she had forgotten something trivial. Oh, and one more thing. You need to clear out that pile of junk by the side door immediately. What junk? I asked. Those old boxes you brought in, she said, waving a hand toward the roll-up door. The ones with the old music and papers. My dad bought a new car yesterday, a beautiful vintage convertible, and he needs this garage space to park it. We can't have your fire hazard cluttering up his parking spot. My blood ran cold. The boxes. When they had cleared out my room yesterday, they had stuffed my clothes in bags, but they had put the boxes of B's things. The things that wouldn't fit in the bags by the side door of the garage. I didn't move them, I said. I haven't had time. Well, I helped you, she said. I moved them outside this morning. The garbage truck comes tomorrow, so I figured I would give you a head start. Outside. I ran to the garage door. I didn't care how I looked. I didn't care about my aching knees. I hit the button on the wall and the heavy door groaned and began to roll up. The morning light flooded in gray and wet. It had rained all night, a heavy, relentless Georgia downpour. I ran out onto the driveway. There they were. 3 cardboard boxes sat in a puddle of muddy water. They had soaked through. The sides had collapsed. Spilling out of them onto the wet asphalt was my life. I fell to my knees. The water soaked instantly into my pants, but I didn't feel it. I reached out and picked up a square of wet cardboard. It was the cover of a first pressing of Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. B had bought it for me with her first paycheck as a teacher in 1978. She had written a note on the back in blue ink. For Silas, my heart and my rhythm. The ink had run. The blue words were just a smear of color now bleeding into the mud. I picked up another. Ella Fitzgerald. The cardboard disintegrated in my hands, leaving the black vinyl record exposed to the grit and the gravel. I looked at the pile, my photos, the photo of B and me at our wedding, the photo of Trey taking his first steps. They were stuck together, a brick of wet pulp, the family Bible where we recorded births and deaths. Swollen, ruined. These weren't just things. These were the proof that I had lived. These were the proof that I had loved and been loved, and they had thrown them out in the rain to make room for a car. I heard footsteps behind me. Paige had followed me out. She was standing under the overhang, protected from the drizzle, holding her coffee. Oh well, she said, looking at the mess. I guess they weren't waterproof. You should have packed them better if they were important. I knelt there in the mud, holding the ruined record cover. I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't a loud snap. It wasn't a scream. It was the sound of a heavy steel cable finally giving way under too much tension. It was the sound of the last thread of attachment I had to this house, to this family, severing completely. I carefully placed the wet cardboard back on the pile. I didn't try to save it. It was gone. B was gone. And the son I thought I had raised was gone too, replaced by the weak man who allowed this to happen. I stood up. I wiped my muddy hands on my pants. I didn't look at the mess again. I turned around and looked at Paige. She took a half step back. Maybe she saw something in my face. Maybe she saw the man who had stared down union bosses and hostile takeover attempts. Maybe she finally saw Silas Montgomery. You did this on purpose, I said. My voice was very quiet. It was the voice of a judge passing a death sentence. Don't be dramatic, Silas, she said, though her voice wavered slightly. It is just old junk. We need the space. Dad's car is arriving this afternoon, and I want the garage clean. I walked past her. I walked back into the garage. I went to the cot. I reached under the pillow and took out the only thing I had saved. A small framed photo of B. I had kept it with me. It was dry. I put it in my pocket. I walked over to the hook on the wall where my keys hung. Not the house keys. The keys to my truck. My truck was parked in the driveway, pushed off to the side to make room for the Henderson's RV. It was a 1970 Ford F-250. Forest green. I had bought it new. I had restored it myself, bolt by bolt. It had 300,000 miles on it, and the engine purred like a kitten. It was the only thing in this driveway that was paid for. I grabbed the keys. Where are you going? Paige asked, following me. You haven't signed the lease. I walked past her again. I walked out into the driveway, past the ruined remains of my memories, past the massive cream-colored RV that blocked out the sky. I walked to my truck. I opened the door. The hinge creaked, a familiar, welcoming sound. I climbed in. The cab smelled of old leather and oil. It smelled like home. I put the key in the ignition. Silas Page shouted, coming down the driveway. You can't just leave. You have to clean up that mess. If you leave that trash there, I will fine you. I will add it to your debt. I rolled down the window. I looked at her one last time. I memorized her face. I memorized the arrogance, the cruelty, the absolute certainty that she held all the cards. She didn't know I was the dealer. You will regret this paper, I said, pointing to the lease she was still clutching in her hand. She laughed, a high, incredulous laugh. Are you threatening me, old man? You have nothing. You are nothing. Go ahead. Drive away in your piece of junk truck. See how far you get on an empty tank. I didn't answer. I turned the key. The engine roared to life. It was a deep, guttural sound, a sound of raw power that shook the frame of the truck. It was not the sound of a gardener's truck. Under the hood was a custom engine block I had installed myself, an engine designed to haul heavy loads over mountains. I shifted into reverse. I backed out of the driveway, carefully avoiding her parents' ridiculous bus. Paige stood there watching me. Her arms crossed, a smirk on her face. She thought I was throwing a tantrum. She thought I would drive around the block, cool off, and come back crawling, begging for the garage, begging to sign her lease. She had no idea. I shifted into drive. I didn't look back. I drove down the street, past the manicured lawns, past the neighbors walking their dogs. I drove out of the subdivision, out of the life I had tried to build with them. I reached for my phone, the flip phone. I dialed Blackwood. Sir, execute Phase 3, I said. Phase 3, sir. That is the nuclear option. That involves the immediate liquidation of the holding company assets. I know what it involves, Blackwood, I said. My eyes were dry. My heart was cold stone. They threw B's records in the mud, Blackwood. They destroyed them. There was a pause, a long silence on the line. Blackwood had known B. He had respected her. Understood, Sir, Blackwood said. His voice was different now, darker. I will have the paperwork ready within the hour. And, sir, yes, I will personally ensure that the eviction team is thorough. Thank you, Blackwood. And book me the suite. The Ritz-Carlton, sir. Yes. The Presidential. I am done sleeping in garages. Consider it done. I hung up the phone. I turned onto the highway, merging into the traffic, heading toward downtown Atlanta. The skyline rose up ahead of me, gleaming in the morning sun. Somewhere in one of those glass towers was my office. My real office. I reached over and patted the empty passenger seat. We are going to war, B, I whispered. And we are going to win. Back at the house, the champagne cork popped with a sound that was far too cheerful for a Sunday morning. I could imagine the scene perfectly as I drove away. Paige would be pouring the expensive Veuve Clicquot into crystal flutes, laughing about how easy it was to get rid of the old nuisance. She was probably telling her parents that they finally had the house to themselves, that the air already felt cleaner without my old man's smell lingering in the hallways. and Trey, my son, would be sitting there nodding along, taking a sip of the wine I had paid for and agreeing that yes, it was for the best. He would tell himself that I was just being dramatic, that I would drive around the block a few times to cool off and come back crawling to sleep in the garage because I had nowhere else to go. He thought he knew me. He thought he knew the extent of my resources. He thought the world ended at the edge of his subdivision. But I was already miles away, merging onto the interstate with the skyline of Atlanta rising before me like a fortress of glass and steel. My old Ford truck rumbled with a deep, steady power vibrating through the steering wheel and into my hands. It was a good truck, an honest truck. It didn't pretend to be anything. It wasn't unlike the people I had just left behind. I drove past the exit for the public park where I used to take Trey to play catch. I drove past the diner where B and I used to share milkshakes on Friday nights. I drove toward the heart of the city where the buildings scraped the sky and where money moved in silence. I pulled up to the entrance of the Ritz-Carlton Atlanta. The hotel stood tall and imposing, a beacon of luxury in the center of the business district. A line of black limousines and luxury sedans idled in the valet lane. Doormen in pristine uniforms opened doors for women in designer dresses and men in Italian suits. I turned the wheel and guided my muddy, dented green truck right into the center of the lane behind a Bentley. The brakes squealed slightly as I came to a stop. The engine idled with the loud chugging rhythm that turned heads. A young valet, barely 20 years old, rushed over his face, a mask of panic and disdain. He waved his hands at me as if he were shooing away a stray dog. "Sir, you cannot park here," he shouted over the sound of the engine. "This is for guests only. Deliveries are in the back. Move this vehicle immediately." I didn't move. I turned off the ignition. The silence that followed was sudden and heavy. I opened the door and stepped out. My boots hit the pavement with a heavy thud. I stood up to my full height, adjusting my suspenders over my flannel shirt. I looked at the boy. "Park it," I said, holding out the keys. "And be careful with the clutch. It sticks if you are not gentle." The boy looked at the keys as if they were covered in slime. "Sir, I am going to have to ask you to leave. We have VIPs arriving. We cannot have this truck blocking the entrance. Security is on the way." He reached for his radio. I stood there calm, unmoving. I saw the guests staring, whispering behind their hands. "Look at that old man. Is he lost? Someone should help him." Then the glass doors of the hotel lobby flew open. A man in an immaculate suit ran out. It was Mr. Sterling, the general manager. He was a man who usually moved with the slow, deliberate grace of someone in charge, but today he was running. He had seen the truck from the lobby cameras. He knew that truck. He knew the license plate. "Mr. Montgomery," Mr. Sterling shouted, breathless, as he reached the curb. He pushed the confused valet aside. "Mr. Montgomery," he repeated, bowing his head slightly, a gesture of respect he usually reserved for heads of state. "My apologies, I did not know you were coming. The staff is new. They do not know." The valet froze, his mouth hanging open. He looked from his boss to the old man in the flannel shirt. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice low. "It has been a while." "Too long, sir, Mr. Sterling said, taking the keys from my hand himself. "I will park this personally. No one else touches it. Is the penthouse to your liking, or should I have the imperial suite prepared?" "The penthouse is fine, Sterling," I said. "And send up a bottle of the Macallan 52, the one I keep in the private reserve. Consider it done, sir. Welcome home." I walked past the stunned valet. I walked past the guests who had stopped whispering and were now staring in confusion. I walked through the revolving glass doors and into the lobby. The air inside was cool and smelled of white tea and money. The marble floors echoed under my boots. As I walked, the staff who recognized me stopped what they were doing. The concierge straightened his tie. The bellhop stood at attention. They didn't see a gardener. They saw the man who owned the building. They saw the man who had tipped them hundreds of dollars for a simple kindness. They saw Silas Montgomery. I walked to the private elevator bank. I pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner. The light turned green. The doors slid open silently. I stepped inside. The mirrors reflected a tired old man with dirt on his pants. But as the elevator rose, leaving the noise of the street far below, I felt a change. My shoulders straightened. The stoop in my back disappeared. The sadness in my eyes was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse. It was a space of quiet luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was leather and velvet. The art on the walls was original. It was a stark contrast to the cold, damp garage I had woken up in. I walked over to the bar where a crystal glass and the bottle of 52-year-old scotch were already waiting. Sterling was efficient. I poured myself a drink. The amber liquid burned pleasantly as it went down, warming the cold that had settled in my bones. I walked to the master bedroom. I didn't look at the king-sized bed with its Egyptian cotton sheets. I walked to the walk-in closet. At the back, behind a row of suits I hadn't worn in years, was a wall safe. I punched in the code, a sequence of numbers that corresponded to B birthday. The heavy steel door clicked and swung open. Inside, there were no stacks of cash. I didn't keep money here. I kept control here. I reached in and took out a heavy gold seal. The corporate seal of Montgomery Logistics, the symbol of my authority as chairman of the board. Beside it sat a satellite phone, a rugged black device designed to work anywhere in the world, secure and untraceable. I carried them back to the living room. I sat in the leather armchair facing the window, looking out over the city that I had helped build. I picked up the satellite phone. I dialed a number. Blackwood answered on the first ring. "Mr. Montgomery, I am at the Ritz, Blackwood," I said. My voice was the voice of the chairman now. "Very good, sir." "Are you comfortable?" "I am comfortable," I said, "but I am not satisfied." "I understand, sir." "Blackwood," I said, taking another sip of the scotch. "Initiate the scorched earth protocol." There was a pause on the line, a hesitation. "Scorched earth, sir, that is comprehensive. That involves the immediate revocation of all family trusts, the seizure of assets, and the termination of all employment contracts linked to your personal accounts." "I know what it means, Blackwood," I said. "Do it." "And the house, sir." "The house belongs to the trust," I said. "The trust lists me as the sole beneficiary with right of immediate revocation. Revoke it." "Sir, that will leave them homeless," I finished. "Yes. Homeless." "They threw B records in the mud, Blackwood. They threw her voice in the mud." "Understood," Sir Blackwood said, his voice hardening. "I will execute the orders immediately. The eviction notice will be served within the hour. And the accounts. Freeze them," I said. "Every single one. If they want to buy a stick of gum, I want their card to decline. It will be done." I hung up the phone. I sat there in the silence, watching the traffic move like toy cars far below. I felt a vibration in my pocket. I pulled out my personal cell phone. It was a text message from Trey. "Dad, wherever you went, just come back and clean the garage tonight. Paige is really mad about the mess. Do not make this worse than it has to be." I stared at the screen. He wasn't worried. He wasn't sorry. He just wanted his servant back to clean up the mess he had made. "Do not make this worse than it has to be." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound in the empty room. "Oh, Trey," I whispered to the phone. "You have no idea how bad this is going to get." I turned off the phone. I took another sip of whiskey. I watched the sun begin to set over Atlanta, casting long shadows over the city. The game was over. The lesson was about to begin. And I was going to be a very strict teacher. Back at the house on Willow Creek Drive, the atmosphere was festive. My absence had been noted, celebrated, and then promptly forgotten. The air conditioning was humming. The expensive surround sound system was playing soft pop music, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the kitchen. Paige was standing in the living room holding a glass of white wine, even though it was barely noon. Her mother Joyce was sitting on the sofa, flipping through a magazine, while Bob was outside, probably inspecting the lawn and thinking about how much better it would look once my truck was gone for good. They were comfortable. They were relaxed. They were living in a reality that had already expired. Paige walked over to the window that looked out onto the side yard. She gestured with her wine glass, pointing toward the detached garage where I had spent my last cold night. "You know, Mom," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone of self-satisfaction she wore like a second skin. "Once we get that old truck towed and clear out the rest of Silas' junk, that garage is going to be perfect. I was thinking we could knock down the interior wall, open it up completely. It would make an amazing pool house." Joyce looked up from her magazine. "A pool house? Oh, honey, that sounds divine. But do you have a pool?" "Not yet," Paige laughed. "But Trey is due for a massive bonus this year. I have already picked out the contractor. We will put in a lap pool right there in the side yard, and the garage will be the cabana, maybe a sauna too. It will be our little oasis. No more oil stains, no more old man smell, just luxury." She took a sip of wine, sighing with contentment. "It is going to be so nice to finally have this place to ourselves. To finally make it ours without having to ask permission or deal with his hoarding." She didn't know that the only thing Trey was due for was a security escort out of his building. She didn't know that the contractor she had picked out would never step foot on the property. She was planning a future on land that was already sliding out from under her feet. The doorbell rang. It was a solid, authoritative sound. Not the ring of a neighbor coming to borrow sugar or a delivery driver dropping off a package. It was a ring that demanded attention. Paige frowned, setting her glass down on a coaster. "Who could that be?" she asked, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. She smoothed her hair and adjusted her silk blouse. She wanted to look the part of the lady of the manor. "Maybe it is the caterer for tonight," Joyce suggested. Paige walked to the door. She opened it with a bright, practiced smile, ready to charm or dismiss whoever was on the other side. Her smile froze. Standing on the porch was a phalanx of men. In the front stood Mr. Blackwood. He was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that absorbed the sunlight. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, and his eyes, behind wire-rimmed glasses, were cold and calculating. He held a leather briefcase in one hand and a thick red envelope in the other. Flanking him were two younger associates, also in dark suits, holding tablets and clipboards. And behind them, standing with his hands on his belt, was Sheriff Miller, the county sheriff. Paige blinked. Her mind raced to process the scene. She saw the suits. She saw the serious expressions. She saw the sheriff. And in her world, her narcissism-filled world, this could only mean one thing: success. She gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Oh my goodness, you must be from Trey Firm." She stepped back, opening the door wider, her smile returning brighter than before. "Please come in." "Come in!" "Trey is not home right now. He is at the office, but I am his wife, Paige. Is this about the promotion? He told me he was up for partner, but I did not expect a delegation." She laughed, a high tinkling sound meant to be charming. "And Sheriff Miller? Is Trey being given an award? Did he donate to the policeman ball again? He is so generous." Blackwood did not smile. He did not step over the threshold. He simply looked at her with the same expression one might use when looking at a termite infestation. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said, his voice a deep baritone that vibrated in the entryway. "Just Paige, please," she said, fluttering her eyelashes. "Can I get you gentlemen anything? Coffee? Water? We have some excellent sparkling water." Blackwood stepped forward then. He moved into the foyer, not because he was accepting her invitation, but because he was claiming the space. His associates followed silently. The sheriff stepped in last, closing the door with a heavy final click. Paige backed up, slightly confused by their lack of social niceties. She gestured toward the living room. "Please have a seat. The sofa is Italian leather, very comfortable. I will just call Trey and tell him you are here. He will be so thrilled, Mrs. Montgomery," Blackwood said again, cutting her off. "We are not here for your husband, and we are certainly not here to celebrate a promotion." Paige stopped her hand halfway to her phone. She looked at Blackwood, her smile faltering for the first time. "Excuse me, I do not understand. If you are not here for Trey, then who are you here for?" "I am here for the owner of this property," Blackwood said. Paige laughed, a nervous, confused sound. "Well, that is Trey. Like I said, he is at work. But I am his wife, so you can speak to me. I handle all the household affairs." Blackwood stared at her. He didn't blink. He walked past her into the living room. He didn't sit on the Italian leather sofa. He stood in the center of the room, dominating it. He placed his briefcase on the coffee table right next to Paige's wine glass. He snapped the latches open. The sound was loud in the quiet house. Joyce had stood up, clutching her magazine to her chest. "Paige, who are these men?" "It is okay, Mom," Paige said, though her voice was rising in pitch. They are confused." Blackwood pulled a document from the briefcase. It was thick, bound in blue legal paper. He placed it on the table. Then he took the red envelope he had been carrying and placed it on top. "My name is Arthur Blackwood," he announced, his voice filling the room. "I am the General Counsel for Montgomery Logistics and the personal attorney for the Montgomery Family Trust." Paige furrowed her brow. "Montgomery Logistics. That is the trucking company Trey works for. Is he in trouble? Did something happen at work?" "You could say that," Blackwood said, "but that is a separate matter. I am here today acting in my capacity as the legal representative for the Montgomery Family Trust, which is the sole and legal owner of the property located at 45 Willow Creek Drive." He gestured around the room. "This house, Mrs. Montgomery." Paige shook her head. "No, you are mistaken. We bought this house 3 years ago. Trey bought it. We have the deed. We pay the mortgage. Blackwood reached into the red envelope. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. You pay a lease fee, Blackwood corrected. A nominal fee of $1 per year, which has been paid automatically by a subsidiary of the trust for the past 36 months. As for the deed, I assure you it does not bear your husband's name. It bears the name of the trust. He held out the paper. This is a notice to quit, Blackwood said. An immediate eviction order. Paige stared at the paper. She didn't take it. She couldn't take it. Taking it would make it real. Eviction, she whispered. That is insane. You cannot evict us. We live here. This is our home. It is a property you occupy, Blackwood said coldly. Under the terms of the lease agreement, Clause 4, Section B, the landlord reserves the right to terminate the tenancy immediately and without cause if the tenant engages in conduct detrimental to the property or the reputation of the trust. Conduct detrimental, Paige sputtered. We have improved this house. We put in granite countertops. We landscaped the yard. We are model homeowners. You threw the landlord personal property into the mud, Blackwood said. His voice dropped an octave, becoming dangerous. You destroyed vintage recordings and personal heirlooms belonging to the chairman. That is destruction of property, Mrs. Montgomery, and it is a violation of the lease. The landlord Paige looked around wildly. What landlord? Silas. Are you talking about Silas? I am talking about Mr. Montgomery, Blackwood said. Paige let out a screech of laughter. It was a hysterical sound bordering on madness. Silas. You are doing this for Silas. That old man. He is a gardener. He fixes trucks. He does not have a trust. He does not have a lawyer in a $3,000 suit. This is a prank. Did Trey put you up to this? Is this some kind of sick joke to teach me a lesson about the garage? She looked at the sheriff. Sheriff Miller, you know us. We are good people. Tell this man to leave. He is trespassing. Sheriff Miller stepped forward. He took off his hat, holding it in his hands. He looked uncomfortable but resolute. Ma'am, he said, I have reviewed the paperwork. Mr. Blackwood has a court order signed by Judge Reynolds this morning. The deed is valid. The eviction is legal. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. 24 hours, Paige screamed. She grabbed the red envelope from Blackwood's hand and tore it open. She stared at the papers, her eyes scanning the dense legal text. This says the owner is Silas Montgomery, sole trustee. That is correct, Blackwood said. But he is broke, Paige yelled. He is a broke old man who eats leftovers and wears flannel. He cannot own this house. It is worth $2 million. Mr. Montgomery is a man of significant means, Blackwood said. He values privacy, and he values family. Unfortunately, you have proven yourself to be an enemy of both. Paige threw the papers at Blackwood. They fluttered to the floor, landing on his polished shoes. I am not going anywhere, she hissed. This is my house. My parents are staying here. We are building a pool. You can take your fake papers and your fake lawyer act and get out. I am calling Trey. He will fix this. He will sue you for harassment. Blackwood brushed a speck of dust from his lapel. By all means, he said calmly. Call your husband. I believe he is currently receiving some news of his own. But I suggest you start packing, Mrs. Montgomery. The sheriff will be stationed outside to ensure that no fixtures or appliances are removed. You may take your clothes and your personal effects. Everything else, furniture, electronics, art, remains with the property. My furniture, Paige shrieked. I picked that out, bought with a credit card paid by the trust. Blackwood countered. It belongs to us. Joyce stood up, her face pale. Paige, what is happening? Are we being thrown out? Mom, it is a mistake, Paige said, grabbing her phone. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely unlock the screen. It is just a mistake. Silas is behind this somehow. He must have stolen some money or forged some papers. I am going to call Trey, and he is going to come home and throw these men out. She dialed the number. She put the phone to her ear. Pick up Trey, she whispered. Pick up and tell them they are crazy. Blackwood watched her. He checked his watch. He should be getting the email right about now, he said softly. Paige's eyes went wide as the call went to voicemail. She dialed again. Answer, she screamed at the phone. But Trey didn't answer. And as the silence in the room stretched out, broken only by Paige panicked breathing, the reality of the situation began to settle like dust. The man in the suit hadn't come to congratulate them. He had come to erase them. And he was just getting started. The silence in the living room was heavy and suffocating, broken only by the sound of Mr. Blackwood reaching into his leather briefcase once more. He did not seem bothered by Paige's outburst or the way she had thrown the papers at him. He moved with the slow, deliberate calm of a man who knows that every card in the deck belongs to him. He pulled out a single sheet of paper encased in a protective plastic sleeve. It looked old. The edges were slightly yellowed, but the signatures at the bottom were fresh and bold in blue ink. Mrs. Montgomery Blackwood said, his voice cutting through the tension like a razor. "You seem to be under the impression that a mortgage exists. You seem to believe that monthly payments have been made to a bank. You are mistaken." He placed the document on the coffee table. He smoothed it out with a gloved hand. "This is the original occupancy agreement," Blackwood continued. "It is not a deed. It is a perpetual lease agreement. It grants the tenant the right to occupy the premises for a nominal fee of $1 per annum. $1, Mrs. Montgomery. That is what this house costs. That is what Mr. Montgomery has been paying on your behalf for 3 years. Paige looked at the paper. She didn't want to look, but she couldn't help herself. She squinted, reading the fine print. Her eyes darted back and forth, scanning for a loophole, for a mistake, for anything that would prove this man was a liar. $1, she whispered. "That is impossible. Trey told me the mortgage was $4,000 a month. He shows me the bank transfers every month." Blackwood allowed a small, cold smile to touch his lips. "Those transfers go into a savings account," Blackwood said. "An account Mr. Trey Montgomery controls, or rather controlled until this morning. He has been paying himself Mrs. Montgomery. He has been taking the money you thought was going to equity and using it to fund his lifestyle. The cars, the clothes, the dinners. It was all a shell game." Paige's face went white. She looked like she was going to be sick. The foundation of her life, the financial security she bragged about to her friends, was crumbling into dust right in front of her. "But that is not the most important part," Blackwood said, tapping a paragraph near the bottom of the page. "This is Clause 17, the Moral Conduct and Filial Responsibility Clause." He began to read aloud, his voice echoing off the high ceilings of the room. "The landlord reserves the right to terminate this lease immediately and without notice should the tenant or any occupant of the premises engage in behavior that is deemed abusive, disrespectful, or detrimental to the physical or emotional well-being of the primary benefactor, Silas Montgomery." Blackwood looked up, his eyes bored into Paige. "You violated Clause 17, Mrs. Montgomery. You violated it when you forced the benefactor to sleep in a garage. You violated it when you destroyed his personal property. You violated it when you laid hands on him. The lease is void. The eviction is mandatory." Paige shook her head, slowly backing away from the table. "No," she said. "No, no, no. This is a trick. Silas wrote this. He typed it up on his old computer to scare me. It is not legal. You cannot enforce a morality clause. This is America. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," Blackwood said smoothly. "But you do not have the right to live in this house." Paige let out a scream of frustration. She grabbed her phone from her pocket. Her fingers flew across the screen, dialing Trey number again. "Pick up," she hissed, pacing the room. "Pick up, you coward." This time the call connected. "Trey, where are you?" she screamed into the phone, not waiting for him to speak. "There are men here. There is a lawyer and a sheriff, and they are saying we don't own the house. They are saying you pay $1 a year. Get home now, Trey. Get home and fix this." She listened for a moment, her eyes widening. "I don't care about your email," she yelled. "I don't care if you got fired. I care about the fact that I am being evicted. Get here, now." She hung up and threw the phone onto the sofa. She turned to her parents, who were sitting frozen in shock. "It is a mistake," she told them, her voice trembling. "Trey is coming. He will clear it up. He is a partner at the firm. He knows people. He will have these men arrested for trespassing." Bob Henderson cleared his throat. "Honey," he said softly, "if he got fired—" "He didn't get fired," Paige snapped. "He probably just got a spam email. Everyone is hacking everything these days. This is all just a big misunderstanding." They waited. The minutes ticked by. Blackwood didn't move. He stood like a statue in the center of the room. The sheriff stood by the door, his hand resting on his belt. The silence was thick, heavy, and filled with the sound of Paige, rapid breathing. 10 minutes later, a car screeched into the driveway. It wasn't the Range Rover. It was an Uber. Trey burst through the front door. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was undone. His shirt was soaked with sweat. He looked like a man who had just run a marathon with a pack of wolves chasing him. He ran into the living room. He saw his wife. He saw his in-laws. And then he saw Mr. Blackwood. Trey stopped dead in his tracks. All the color drained from his face. His knees actually buckled and he had to grab the back of a chair to stay upright. "Mr. Blackwood," Trey whispered. His voice was full of terror, pure, unadulterated fear. "You know him," Paige demanded, pointing at Blackwood. "Trey, tell him. Tell him this is our house. Tell him to get out." Trey didn't look at Paige. He couldn't take his eyes off Blackwood. He knew who Blackwood was. He had seen him at the company headquarters once from a distance. He knew Blackwood was the personal attorney for the chairman, the mysterious figure who owned Montgomery Logistics. He knew that when Blackwood showed up, it wasn't a negotiation. It was an execution. Trey, Paige said, shaking his arm. "Why aren't you saying anything? Tell him we bought this house. Tell him about the mortgage." Trey looked at his wife. His eyes were hollow. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing from the collection plate. "Paige," he said, his voice cracking, We didn't buy it." "What?" Paige whispered. "We didn't buy it," Trey said louder this time, tears starting to form in his eyes. Dad told me we could live here. He said it was a company perk. He said as long as I worked for Montgomery Logistics, the housing was covered. He said it was a family benefit." "A family benefit," Paige repeated. She looked like she had been slapped. "You told me we owned it. You told me we had equity. You told me my name was on the deed. I lied." Trey sobbed. "I lied, okay. I wanted you to be happy. I wanted you to think I was successful. I couldn't tell you that my dad was subsidizing our life. I couldn't tell you that he was paying for the cars and the credit cards. I thought it would last forever. I thought as long as he was around, he would take care of us." "You idiot," Paige screamed. She pushed him away. "You lied to me for 3 years. I did it for you," Trey pleaded, reaching for her. "I did it so you could have the pool and the parties and the lifestyle. I spent every dime I made trying to keep up with you." Blackwood stepped forward, clearing his throat. The sound silenced them both instantly. "Mr. Montgomery," Blackwood said, addressing Trey, "you seem to be under a misapprehension. You believe this arrangement was a corporate benefit, a perk of your employment." "Yes," Trey said, wiping his face. "Yes, it is in my contract. Housing allowance." "It was never in your contract," Blackwood said coldly. "I wrote your contract, Mr. Montgomery. You were hired as a junior logistics coordinator. Your salary is $45,000 a year. The housing, the cars, the credit cards, those were not corporate benefits. Those were personal gifts." "Gifts?" Trey asked, confused. "From who?" "From the chairman." "Correct," Blackwood said. Trey looked confused. "But why?" "I have never met the chairman. I have never even seen him. Why would he pay for my house? Why would he give me a black card?" Blackwood looked at him with something that might have been pity if Blackwood were capable of such an emotion. Instead, it looked like disappointment. "You really don't know, do you?" Blackwood asked. "You really have no idea who signs your checks?" Trey shook his head. "No, I thought maybe he knew Dad. Maybe Dad pulled some strings. Dad knows a lot of people in the industry." Blackwood let out a short, dry sigh. "Mr. Montgomery," he said, his voice ringing with authority, "your father does not just know people. Your father is the people. Silas Montgomery is the founder, owner, and chairman of the board of Montgomery Logistics. He owns the trucks. He owns the warehouses. He owns this house. And he owns the debt you have been racking up for the last decade." The room spun. I could see it in Trey's eyes. The world tilted on its axis. Silas, his father, the man in the flannel shirt, the man he had banished to the garage, the man he had treated like a senile, embarrassing burden. "Dad," Trey whispered. "Dad is the chairman. He is Blackwood confirmed. And you have treated the chairman with a level of disrespect that has triggered the immediate revocation of all privileges. You are not just fired, Mr. Montgomery. You are disowned, financially and practically." Trey fell to his knees. He actually fell to his knees on the expensive rug. He put his head in his hands and began to weep. It wasn't a cry of sorrow. It was a cry of loss. He wasn't crying for me. He was crying for the money. Paige stood there frozen. Her brain was trying to reconfigure the universe. Silas, the old man, the gardener. He was a millionaire. He was a tycoon, and she had thrown his records in the mud. She had pushed him. She had called him useless. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, we have to fix this." "Trey, get up. We have to find him. We have to apologize." She looked at Blackwood, wild hope in her eyes. "Where is he? Where is Silas? I need to talk to him. I need to explain. It was the stress. It was the hormones. I love Silas. He knows I love him. Blackwood didn't even blink. Mr. Montgomery is currently unavailable, he said. He has taken residence in a location that befits his station, a location where he will not be disturbed by ungrateful tenants. Please, Paige begged, grabbing Blackwood's arm. You have to tell him. We didn't know. If we had known, if you had known he had money, you would have treated him better. Blackwood finished for her. His voice dripped with disdain. That Mrs. Montgomery is exactly the problem. You treated him like a dog because you thought he was poor. That reveals your character far more than any apology ever could. He pulled his arm away from her grasp. He checked his watch. He looked at the sheriff. Sheriff Miller. Blackwood said, I believe my business here is concluded. The notice has been served. The legal standing has been explained. Sheriff Miller stepped forward. He hitched up his belt. The sound of the leather creaking was loud in the silent room. All right, folks, the sheriff said, his voice booming. You heard the man. The paperwork is solid. This isn't your house. It never was. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. That means you and your belongings need to be on the other side of that property line by 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. But where will we go? Joyce wailed from the sofa. We can't live in the RV forever. That sounds like a personal problem, ma'am, the sheriff said. I suggest you start packing. If you are not out by 10 a.m., I will have to arrest you for trespassing, and I don't want to do that. But I will. Trey looked up from the floor. His face was a mess of tears and snot. 24 hours, he croaked. But we have nowhere to go. Our accounts are frozen. I checked. I can't even buy a sandwich. Blackwood snapped his briefcase shut. Then perhaps you should have saved some of the allowance your father gave you, Blackwood said, instead of spending it on Italian leather sofas and vintage wine. He turned and walked toward the door. He didn't look back. Good day to you all, Blackwood called out over his shoulder, and good luck. You are certainly going to need it. The door closed behind him. The sound was final. Inside the house, the air conditioning hummed, the only sound in a room filled with 4 people who had just realized that they were standing on a trapdoor that had already opened. Night had fallen over Atlanta, and from my vantage point in the presidential suite of the Ritz-Carlton, the city looked like a circuit board of gold and amber light. I sat in a high-backed leather chair with a tablet resting on my knee. On the screen was a live feed of the financial dismantling of my son's life. It was a cold thing to watch, but necessary. Like pruning a tree that has become rotten at the core, you have to cut deep to save the roots. I took a sip of mineral water and watched the digital indicators turn from green to red one by one. Back at the house on Willow Creek Drive, the siege was underway. They had not packed a single box. The sheriff had left hours ago, leaving a deputy parked at the end of the street to ensure order, but inside the house, denial had turned into a frantic war room. I could picture it perfectly. Paige would be pacing the length of the living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors I had paid for. She would be holding her phone like a weapon, convinced that she could bully or bribe her way out of this reality. She was trying to hire a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. She wanted a shark. She wanted someone who would sue me for emotional distress, elder abuse, and breach of contract. She wanted to countersue Mr. Blackwood. She wanted to burn the world down because she had been told no for the first time in her life. I watched the transaction attempts scroll across my tablet screen in real time. It was fascinating. At 8:15, she found a firm in New York. A retainer of $25,000 was required immediately to take the case on an emergency basis. I saw the request hit the server. She was using the black card, the Centurion card. It was a piece of anodized titanium that weighed as much as a small stone. I had given it to Trey 5 years ago for emergencies, medical issues, travel disasters, bail. Instead, he had given it to his wife, and she used it to buy handbags and influence. She thought the limit was infinite. She thought it was a magic wand that erased problems. I tapped the screen of my tablet. Access denied. I imagined the scene, Paige typing the numbers into the secure portal, her manicured nails clicking on the keyboard. She hits submit. She waits for the confirmation screen that always comes, the screen that says approved. Instead, she got a red banner. Transaction declined. Contact issuer. She would try again. She would think it was a typo. She would think the internet connection flickered. She entered the numbers again, slower this time, reading them off the heavy black metal. Declined. I could hear her scream in my mind. I could hear her yelling at Trey. Fix this. Call the bank. Tell them who we are. But Trey could not call the bank. Because Trey was not the account holder. I was. Trey was just an authorized user, a privilege I had just revoked with a single keystroke. Then the floodgates opened. I saw a flurry of activity on the monitoring dashboard. They were trying everything. Trey tried his personal Platinum Amex, the one he used for client dinners and golf outings. He tried to transfer $5,000 to his checking account, probably to have cash on hand. Account frozen. Reason suspected fraud. He tried his debit card at the local ATM. I saw the ping from the machine down the street. He must have run out to get cash while Paige was screaming. Card retained by machine. Please contact financial institution. He was standing in a parking lot somewhere, staring at a machine that had just eaten his access to food and gas. He was realizing that the plastic in his wallet was just plastic. Without my backing, it had no value. It was just scrap. Back at the house, the panic was setting in. I could feel it radiating through the city. They were trapped. They had no cash. They had no credit. They had $20,000 in debt on cards that were now demanding payment in full because the primary guarantor had withdrawn support. But the financial strangulation was just the beginning. I wanted to take away their status. I wanted to strip them of the titles they hid behind. At 8:45, Trey's phone would have pinged. It wasn't a text from a friend. It was a priority email from the Human Resources Department of Montgomery Logistics. I had drafted the email myself earlier that afternoon with Blackwood. It was brutal. It was honest. Subject: immediate termination of employment for cause. I knew exactly what it said. It detailed his lack of performance. It listed the meetings he had missed. It outlined the client accounts he had neglected. But the killing blow was the paragraph about the company assets. Investigation has revealed a gross misuse of company funds and resources for personal gain shielded by family connection. This protection is hereby revoked. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. You are ineligible for severance. Security has been notified to clear your desk. And then the kicker. The vehicle currently in your possession, a 2023 Porsche Cayenne, is company property leased for executive use. The lease has been terminated. A recovery team has been dispatched to retrieve the asset. Please leave the keys in the vehicle and remove personal items immediately. Failure to do so will result in a report of grand theft auto. Trey loved that car. He loved it more than he loved his wife. He washed it by hand every Sunday. He parked it diagonally across 2 spaces to avoid dings. It was his identity. It was the metal shell that told the world he was a success. Now it was a stolen car sitting in a driveway he didn't own. I took another sip of water. I wasn't happy. A father should never be happy to destroy his son. But I was satisfied. I was satisfied that the lie was finally over, but I wasn't done. They were still in the house. They were still sitting on my furniture, using my electricity, breathing my air. They were probably huddled in the living room, trying to figure out which friend they could borrow money from, trying to spin a story about a banking error or a identity theft hack. They were still comfortable. I picked up the satellite phone. Blackwood. Sir, Phase 2 is complete, I said. The accounts are locked. The employment is terminated. Correct, sir. The recovery team for the vehicle is 5 minutes away. They have the spare key. They will take it quietly. Good. Now execute Phase 3. The utilities, sir. Yes, I said. Cut it all. The power, the water, the gas, the internet, even the cable. I want that house to go dark. I want it to be as cold and empty as their hearts. Sir, there are elderly people in the house, Mr. and Mrs. Henderson. They have an RV in the driveway, I said. If they get cold, they can go sleep in their bus, but the house dies tonight. Understood. Contacting the providers now. I hung up. I walked to the window. I couldn't see the house from here, but I watched the city lights. 10 minutes later, I imagined the scene. Paige would be in the kitchen, maybe trying to make tea to calm her nerves. She would fill the kettle at the tap. The water pressure would drop. It would sputter. Then it would stop. Just a dry cough from the faucet. She would try the fridge dispenser. Nothing. She would yell for Trey. Trey, what is wrong with the water? Trey would be in the living room staring at his phone, trying to refresh his email, trying to find a way to undo the firing. The Wi-Fi symbol on his phone would vanish. The connection would drop. The smart TV on the wall, which was probably playing news, would freeze and go black. Then the lights. It wouldn't be a flicker. It would be a hard cut. The chandelier in the foyer. The recessed lighting in the kitchen. The lamps in the living room. All of them would die at once. Darkness. Absolute sudden darkness. The hum of the HVAC system would spin down. The silence would rush in, filling the void left by the technology. I could hear the screams in my imagination. Paige shrieking in the dark. Joyce crying out that she couldn't see. Bob cursing and bumping his shins against the coffee table. They would scramble for their phones using the flashlights. The beams would cut through the dark, illuminating their terrified faces. They would look like ghosts haunting a house that had already moved on without them. They would try the thermostat. The screen would be blank. The heat was gone. The temperature outside was dropping. The house was large and drafty without the furnace running. The cold would start to seep in under the doors through the windows, just like it had seeped into the garage where they had put me. They were experiencing a fraction of what they had done to me. They were experiencing displacement. They were experiencing powerlessness. I checked the time. It was 9:30. The recovery team would be arriving now. I imagined Trey hearing the sound of an engine in the driveway. He would run to the window, shining his phone light through the glass. He would see a tow truck backing up, or maybe just a driver with a second key getting into his beloved Porsche. He would run to the door. He would try to open it. But the electronic locks on the front door were powered by the house grid with a battery backup that I had disabled remotely days ago. Or perhaps they would just open it manually and run out into the night. He would watch the taillights of his car disappear down the street. He would stand there in the dark driveway in his expensive suit that he no longer had a job to wear, to watching his status drive away. He would turn back to the house, the dark, silent house. He would walk back inside. He would look at his wife. He would look at his in-laws. They were sitting in the dark. They had no money. They had no jobs. They had no cars. They had no water. They had no heat. They were huddled together on the Italian leather sofa, covered in the expensive throw blankets that Paige had bought just for show. They were shivering, not just from the cold, but from the shock. The luxury they had worshipped was still there. The granite countertops, the high ceilings, the art on the walls. But without the power that I provided, it was useless. It was just a cold, dark museum of their vanity. I imagined Paige trying to blame someone, trying to blame Trey, trying to blame the bank. But deep down in the dark where the lies couldn't hide, she knew. She knew this was me. She knew the gardener had cut the vine. I turned away from the window. The hotel room was warm. The lights were soft. The jazz music played gently from the speakers. I had everything. I walked to the bedroom. I had a busy day tomorrow. Tomorrow they would come to me. Tomorrow they would try to beg. And tomorrow I would show them the receipts. I laid down on the bed. I didn't feel guilty. I felt like a man who had finally put down a heavy load. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in 3 years, I slept without wondering if I was welcome in my own home. I watched the sun rise over Atlanta from the balcony of the presidential suite. The coffee in my hand was hot, and the robe I wore was made of heavy plush cotton. It was a beautiful morning for me. But 5 miles away in the house on Willow Creek Drive, the sun did not bring warmth. It only brought the harsh, unforgiving light of day to a battlefield. I had access to the security cameras inside the house. I had installed them years ago, not to spy, but for safety. Now they were my window into the collapse of an empire built on sand. The living room was a wreck. The expensive throw pillows were scattered on the floor. Empty water bottles littered the coffee table. The house was freezing. Without the heating system, the large open spaces that Paige loved so much had turned into an icebox. They were all huddled in the living room, wrapped in blankets, looking like refugees in a designer showroom. Bob Henderson was the first to break. He stood up, throwing his blanket aside. He was wearing his silk pajamas, but his face was red with a rage that had been simmering all night. He marched over to where Trey was sitting with his head in his hands. "This is garbage," Bob shouted, his voice cracking in the cold air. "Absolute garbage. I woke up freezing. My phone is dead. There is no water to flush the toilet. And I want to know why." Trey didn't look up. He was shivering. He was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, the expensive suit that was now wrinkled and stained with sweat. "It is a mistake," Trey mumbled. "I told you, it is a banking error. It is a banking error," Bob roared. "A banking error does not send the sheriff to your door. A banking error does not repossess a Porsche from the driveway in the middle of the night. A banking error does not cut the power to the entire house." Bob grabbed Trey by the shoulder and shook him. "You are a liar," Bob spat. "You have been lying to us. You told us you were a partner. You told us you were making $500,000 a year. You told us you owned this house. I am a partner, Trey stammered, pulling away. I mean, I am an executive. I have the title. You have nothing, Bob screamed. You have a foreclosure notice and a stolen car. You are a fraud, Trey. I knew it. I knew you were too soft. I told Joyce. I said that boy has soft hands. He has never worked a day in his life. And now look, you have dragged my daughter into your mess. Joyce chimed in from the sofa, her voice shrill and panicked. We have to leave, Bob. We can't stay here. It is unsanitary. We are not going anywhere until I get some answers, Bob yelled. He pointed a finger at Trey's face. How much do you make? The real number. Not the fantasy number you tell your wife. Look me in the eye and tell me how much you deposit every month. Trey looked at Paige. She was sitting on the edge of the sofa, wrapped in a fur throw. She looked pale. Her makeup was smeared. She stared at him, waiting. Tell him, Trey, she whispered. Tell him he is wrong. Tell him about your bonuses. Tell him about the quarterly dividends. Trey started to cry. It was a pathetic sound. The sound of a man who had never had to face a consequence in his 35 years of life. I make $3,000, he sobbed. The silence in the room was absolute. It was colder than the air. What Paige whispered. $3,000 a month. Trey confessed, the words tumbling out of him like vomit. After taxes, it is about $3,000. That is my salary. That is what is on my W-2. Bob Henderson started to laugh. It was a cruel, incredulous sound. $3,000. You pay $2,000 just for the club membership. You spend $500 on dinner. How? How is that possible? The rest was the allowance, Trey cried. It just showed up. Every month, $20,000, sometimes more. It was deposited into my account labeled performance incentive. I thought it was because I was doing a good job. I thought the company valued me. I thought I was a top performer. You idiot, Bob shouted. You moron. Companies do not pay junior executives $20,000 a month in secret bonuses. I didn't know, Trey wailed. I didn't question it. Why would I question it? The money was there. The black card was there. I thought I was special. Paige stood up. The fur throw slid to the floor. She walked over to Trey. She looked down at him with a look of pure revulsion. You are a logistics coordinator, she said, her voice flat. You coordinate trucks. You don't close deals. You don't manage accounts. You move boxes on a spreadsheet. I am the son of the founder, Trey said weakly. That has to count for something. Paige slapped him. It was a hard, sharp sound that echoed in the empty house. It counts for nothing, she screamed. You have been living off an allowance. You are a child. You are a 35-year-old child, and I married you because I thought you were a man. I thought you were rich. I am rich, Trey pleaded. We were rich until yesterday. Until yesterday, Paige repeated. She turned away from him, running her hands through her hair. She began to pace the room. Her mind was working, trying to connect the shattered pieces of her reality. Yesterday, she muttered. Yesterday, I kicked Silas out. Yesterday, I threw his records in the mud. Yesterday, I told him he was a burden. She stopped pacing. She looked at the empty spot on the wall where the television used to hang before the power went out. Why, she asked. Why now? Why did the money stop the second Silas left? Trey sniffled, wiping his nose on his sleeve. Because Dad must have been the one covering for me. He must have been talking to payroll. He must have been pulling strings. Paige shook her head. No, that doesn't make sense. Silas is a pensioner. He drives a truck from 1970. He fixes the sink with duct tape. He can't authorize a $20,000 monthly bonus. He can't authorize a black card. She turned to Trey, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. Trey, she said. Who is the chairman? Trey looked confused. What? The lawyer Paige said. That man Blackwood. He said he worked for the Montgomery Family Trust. He said he represented the chairman, who is the chairman of Montgomery Logistics. Trey shrugged. I don't know. No one knows. It is a private company. The chairman is a ghost. He never comes to the office. He never joins the Zoom calls. We just get emails, directives. Everyone is terrified of him. Think, Trey, Paige screamed. Think. You have worked there for 10 years. You must know something. Trey rubbed his temples. I don't know. The rumors are that he is some old tycoon who lives on an island, or that it is a board of directors. But Blackwood... What about Blackwood Page pressed? Blackwood is a legend, Trey said. He is the Grim Reaper. He only shows up when the company is buying a competitor or liquidating an asset. He answers to no one. He only takes calls from one person. Who Page demanded. The founder, Trey whispered. And who is the founder? Page asked, her voice trembling. Trey looked up. His eyes met hers, and in that moment the realization hit him like a physical blow. The color drained from his face, leaving him gray and ashy. The founder is Silas Montgomery, Trey said. Page froze. No, she said. No. Silas is your dad. Silas is the guy who sleeps in the garage. Silas started the company in 1972. Trey said, his voice gaining strength as the memories flooded back. He told me stories when I was a kid, about the first truck, about driving all night. I forgot. I forgot. He retired years ago. I thought he sold it. I thought he cashed out and lost it all on bad investments. That is what you told me, Paige. You told me he was broke. I assumed he was broke, Paige shrieked. Because he lives like a pauper. He wears flannel. He eats beans. Rich people don't live like that. Rich people do whatever they want, Bob Henderson said from the corner. His anger had been replaced by a look of terrified awe. Paige looked at her father. What? Real money, Bob said quietly. The kind of money that owns towns. They don't wear Gucci. They don't drive Ferraris. They wear work boots because they don't have to impress anyone. We missed it. We missed it completely. Paige sank to her knees. She looked around the dark, freezing house. So, this isn't a mistake, she whispered. No, Trey said. This is a punishment. Trey nodded slowly. Blackwood called him the benefactor. He said we violated the morality clause. Paige put her hands over her mouth. A sound escaped her lips, a half-sob, half-laugh. I called him old man, she whispered. I turned off his TV. I told him he was messing up my chai. I made him serve us dinner. You pushed him, Trey said. You pushed the chairman of the board onto the floor, and you told him to get out. Paige shot back. You told the man who signs your checks to get out of his own house. They stared at each other, two people realizing that they had not just burned a bridge, they had bombed the entire landscape. What do we do? Joyce asked, her voice trembling. We have to find him, Trey said, scrambling to his feet. We have to find Dad. We have to beg. We have to get on our knees and beg. Where is he? Paige asked. Blackwood said he went somewhere befitting his station, Trey said. The Ritz, Bob Henderson said. They all looked at him. I saw a charge on your card statement once, Bob said to Trey. A massive charge for a dinner at the Ritz. You said it was a client, but you said your dad recommended the place. You said he knew the steak. He loves that place, Trey said. He used to take Mom there for their anniversary. He said they treated him like a king even when he was driving the truck. That is where he is, Paige said, standing up. She wiped her face. She smoothed her dress. Get up, she ordered. Get dressed. We are going to the Ritz. We can't, Trey said. They took the car. We will take the RV, Bob said. We will drive the bus right up to the front door. But we look like a mess, Joyce cried. I haven't showered. It doesn't matter, Paige said, her eyes hard and desperate. We are going to find Silas, and we are going to remind him that we are family. He loves family. He is obsessed with it. That is his weakness. We just have to cry enough. We just have to look pathetic enough. She didn't know that pathetic was no longer a currency I accepted. She didn't know that the bank of Silas Montgomery was closed permanently. Let's go! Paige commanded, marching toward the door. They filed out of the house, leaving the door unlocked behind them. It didn't matter. There was nothing left inside worth stealing. The real treasure had been the man they threw away. I watched them on the screen, leaving the driveway in the massive cream-colored RV. It looked ridiculous lumbering down the quiet suburban street. I finished my coffee. I picked up the phone and dialed the front desk. Mr. Sterling. Yes, Mr. Montgomery. I am expecting visitors, I said. A circus is coming to town. Understood, sir? Shall I have security turn them away? No, I said. Send them up. I want to see their faces when they realize how high the elevator goes. Very good, sir. I hung up. I walked to the bedroom and opened the closet. I pushed aside the flannel shirts I had brought with me. I reached for the garment bag Sterling had brought up from storage. I unzipped it. Inside was a suit. Italian wool. Custom fit. A suit meant for a boardroom. A suit meant for a chairman. I put it on. I tied the tie. I put on the gold cufflinks with the company logo. I looked in the mirror. The gardener was gone. The old man was gone. The chairman stared back at me, and he was ready for a meeting. The security feed on my tablet showed a comedy of errors unfolding in the driveway of the Ritz-Carlton. It was a sight that would have been hilarious if it weren't so pathetic. The massive cream-colored RV, the one that had blocked my driveway and my life for the past 48 hours, lurched around the corner of Peachtree Street. It looked like a beached whale navigating a school of minnows. The driver was Bob Henderson, and judging by the way he scraped the curb, he was not used to driving a vehicle that size in city traffic. He pulled up right behind a Rolls-Royce Phantom blocking 2 lanes of traffic and laid on the horn as if the world existed solely to get out of his way. I took a sip of my sparkling water and zoomed in on the screen. The door of the RV swung open and my family spilled out onto the pristine pavement. They looked like refugees from a failed country club. Paige was wearing the same dress she had worn yesterday, but now it was wrinkled and stained with something that looked like coffee. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was flat and disheveled. Trey looked like a ghost, his expensive suit jacket missing, his shirt unbuttoned, and his eyes red and swollen. Joyce Henderson was clutching her purse to her chest, looking around nervously as if she expected the police to jump out from behind the potted plants. And Bob Henderson, wearing rumpled khakis and a polo shirt that had seen better days, slammed the driver's door and marched toward the entrance with the bluster of a man who knows he is losing. They stormed the revolving doors. I switched the audio feed on. "You can't park that here, sir," the doorman said, stepping in front of Bob. "The valet cannot accept recreational vehicles." Bob pushed past him. "I am not parking. I am visiting. Get out of my way, son. My son-in-law's father is staying here. Silas Montgomery. Tell him we are here." The doorman signaled to security. 2 large men in black suits materialized from the shadows of the lobby. They blocked the path to the elevators, their faces stone. "Sir, ma'am, you need to step back," the head of security said calmly. "This is a private establishment. If you do not have a reservation, you cannot be here." Paige pushed to the front. She looked wild, desperate. Her eyes darted around the opulent lobby, taking in the chandeliers, the fresh flowers, the quiet hum of wealth. It was the world she wanted to belong to, the world she thought she deserved, and yet she was standing there looking like a vagrant. "I am family," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "Silas Montgomery is my father-in-law. He is expecting us. Call him. Call his room. Tell him Paige is here. Tell him we need to talk." The guests in the lobby stopped their quiet conversations. A woman in a silk scarf looked at Paige with a mixture of pity and disgust. The concierge picked up a phone, speaking in a hushed tone. "I am sorry, ma'am," the security guard said, taking a step forward. "We have no instructions to admit you. You are causing a disturbance. Please leave, or we will have to call the police." Police Paige laughed, a hysterical, jagged sound. "Go ahead. Call them. I want the police. My father-in-law has stolen our lives. He is hiding up there in his ivory tower while we freeze. Silas, come down here." She tilted her head back and screamed at the ceiling. "Silas!" It was embarrassing. It was raw. It was the sound of entitlement hitting a brick wall. Trey tried to grab her arm to pull her back, but she shook him off. "Don't touch me," she hissed. "This is your fault. Fix it! Get him down here!" Trey looked at the security guards. "Please," he said, his voice trembling. "Just call him. Tell him it is Trey. Tell him I just want to talk. Please, I am his son." The security guard looked unmoved. He reached for his radio. "That is enough," he said. "Escort them out." Just as the guards reached for Bob and Trey, the elevator doors at the far end of the lobby slid open with a soft chime. The sound cut through the tension like a knife. Mr. Blackwood stepped out. He didn't rush. He walked across the marble floor with a slow, predatory grace. His shoes clicked rhythmically. He held his briefcase in one hand and checked his watch with the other. The security guards stopped immediately, stepping back to create a path for him. The hotel staff straightened up. Even the guests seemed to sense that the temperature in the room had dropped. Blackwood stopped 5 feet from the huddled group of my family. He looked them over. He looked at Bob's dirty shoes. He looked at Paige's desperate face. He looked at Trey's tears. "Mr. Blackwood." Trey whispered hope flaring in his eyes. Blackwood didn't smile. He adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Montgomery has agreed to see you," Blackwood said. His voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the lobby. Paige let out a sob of relief. Thank God. I knew it. I knew he wouldn't abandon us. Where is he? Take us to him. She took a step forward, but Blackwood raised a hand, stopping her cold. You have 5 minutes, Blackwood said. Not a second more. Mr. Montgomery is a busy man and his lunch has just been served. You will go up. You will say what you have to say, and then you will leave. If you are not out of the building in 10 minutes, the security team has been authorized to remove you by force. Do you understand? We understand, Bob said, puffing out his chest, trying to regain some dignity. We just need to clear up this misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Mr. Henderson Blackwood said, turning back to the elevator. Only consequences. Follow me. They followed him like sheep to the slaughter. They huddled into the elevator, Blackwood standing near the buttons, pressing the key for the penthouse floor. The doors closed, shutting out the stairs of the lobby. The ride up was silent. I watched it on the camera inside the elevator. They watched the numbers climb. 10, 20, 30. Their eyes grew wider with every passing floor. They had never been this high. They had no idea this level of the hotel even existed. When the elevator dinged at the top floor, the doors opened directly into my living room. I was ready for them. I was sitting at the head of the long dining table, which was positioned in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I was wearing the Italian silk suit I had put on earlier. It shimmered slightly in the afternoon light, a deep midnight blue that made my silver hair look like polished steel. I wasn't hunched over. I wasn't looking at the floor. I sat with my back straight, my hands resting on the table. In front of me, a waiter was just placing a plate. On it sat a steak. Not just any steak. It was an A5 Wagyu ribeye imported from Japan, perfectly seared, the marbling melting into a rich, savory juice. Beside it was a glass of the 52-year-old Macallan. The room was filled with music. Not the noise Paige had complained about. It was Miles Davis playing So What, pouring from a sound system that cost more than the Hendersons' RV. The bass line thrummed in the air, sophisticated and cool. They stepped out of the elevator and froze. They looked at the room. They looked at the art, they looked at the view, and then they looked at me. I saw the shock hit them physically. They were looking for the gardener. They were looking for the old man in the flannel shirt who fixed the sink with duct tape. They were looking for the man they could bully. Instead, they found the chairman. Dad Trey whispered. I didn't answer immediately. I picked up my knife and fork. The silverware was heavy, solid silver. I cut a small piece of the steak. The knife slid through the meat like it was butter. I put it in my mouth and chewed slowly, savoring the flavor. I took a sip of the scotch. Then I looked at them. You have 4 minutes and 30 seconds, I said. Paige took a step forward. She looked around the room, her eyes wide and hungry. She saw the luxury. She saw the power. And she realized that all of this could have been hers if she had just been kind. Silas, she said, her voice trembling. This is amazing. You own this. I own the company that owns the hotel chain that owns this building, I said calmly. Technically, I am a guest, but I am a very important guest. Bob Henderson cleared his throat. He looked smaller now. The bluster was gone, replaced by a sweaty fear. Silas, look, he said, wringing his hands. We didn't know. If we had known you were, well, a man of substance, we would have. You would have what Henderson I asked, cutting him off. You would have given me a better room. You wouldn't have thrown my wife's things in the mud. You would have treated me with respect because I had money. Well, yes, Bob said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Respect is earned, Silas. Success demands respect. I stood up. I didn't rush. I unfolded my frame, rising to my full height. In the tailored suit, I looked bigger, broader. I looked like a man who could crush them with a word. Respect is given to human beings, Bob, I said, my voice dropping to a growl. You don't respect the wallet. You respect the man. You treated me like garbage because you thought I was poor. That tells me everything I need to know about your soul. It is rot, Bob. Pure rot. I turned my gaze to Trey. He was staring at me, tears streaming down his face. He wasn't looking at the steak or the view. He was looking at me, and for the first time in years I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Dad, he choked out. I am sorry. I am so sorry. I messed up. I got lost. Paige. She wanted things, and I wanted to give them to her. I wanted to be the big man. You wanted to be the big man, I repeated. So, you made me small. Is that it, Trey? To make yourself feel big, you had to make your father small. You had to put me in the garage. You had to let your wife talk to me like I was a dog. I was weak, Trey sobbed. I am weak. Yes, I said. You are, and I made you that way. I gave you everything, Trey. I gave you the job. I gave you the house. I gave you the money. I never let you struggle. I never let you fall. And because of that, you never learned how to stand up. I walked around the table. I approached them. They shrank back, huddled together near the elevator doors. But the lesson starts now, I said. I am taking it all back, Trey. The job, the house, the money, the car. It is all gone. You are starting from zero. Actually, you are starting from negative. You have debts, Trey. Debts I am no longer covering. Paige threw herself at my feet. It was a dramatic, desperate move. She grabbed the leg of my silk trousers. Silas. Please, she begged, looking up at me, her mascara running. We can't survive. We have nothing. My parents have nothing. We will be on the street. You can't do this to family. I looked down at her. I looked at the woman who had turned off my music, the woman who had called me old man, the woman who had pushed me. Get up, Paige, I said coldly. You are wrinkling the suit. She let go, sobbing, curling into a ball on the floor. You have 1 minute left, I said, checking my watch. Mom, Dad, help me, Paige wailed. Joyce stepped forward. She tried to smile, but it looked like a grimace of pain. Silas, be reasonable. We are old people, too. We can't live in that RV forever. It isn't hooked up. We have no water. Then drive it back to Florida, I said, or sell it. I believe you have a mortgage on your condo that is 3 months overdue. I checked. Bob's face went gray. How did you know that? I know everything, I said. I know about the second mortgage. I know about the failed business venture in Miami. I know you came here to leech off Trey because you were drowning. You thought you found a lifeboat. Instead, you found an anchor. Blackwood stepped forward from the shadows near the elevator. Time is up, he announced. I turned my back on them. I walked back to the table. I sat down and picked up my fork. Please, Trey whispered. Dad, please. Just give us a chance. One chance. I cut another piece of steak. I didn't look at them. Blackwood, remove them, I said. The elevator doors opened. 2 security guards stepped out. They didn't have to use force. The fight had gone out of them. Trey helped Paige up. Bob supported Joyce. They shuffled into the elevator, broken, defeated, and small. As the doors began to close, I heard Paige's voice one last time. He is a monster, she sobbed. I chewed the steak. It was perfect. Tender, rich, and flavorful. No, Paige, I thought as the doors clicked shut, sealing my sanctuary. I am not a monster. I am a mirror. And you just don't like what you see. The sound of Paige crying on the floor of my penthouse should have moved me. A father or a father-in-law is supposed to have a soft spot for the tears of his children, but I felt nothing. I cut another piece of the Wagyu steak and watched the juice run onto the porcelain plate. The meat was tender and rich, a stark contrast to the bologna sandwiches I had been eating in the garage just 2 days ago. Paige was on her knees, her hands clutching the fabric of my trousers, her knuckles white. She was sobbing, but I knew the difference between tears of sorrow and tears of terror. These were the tears of a woman who was watching her future evaporate. Dad, please, she wailed, looking up at me through a mask of smeared mascara. We made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But we did it because we love you. We thought you were losing your mind. We wanted to put you in a home because we wanted you to be safe. We were scared for you. We only wanted what was best for you. I stopped chewing. I swallowed the steak and took a sip of the 52-year-old scotch. The liquid was smooth like liquid gold. I set the glass down on the table with a soft click. You wanted what was best for me? I repeated, my voice flat. Yes, she cried, nodding frantically. We were going to find you a beautiful facility, with doctors and nurses. We didn't want you to hurt yourself in that big empty house. I looked at her. I looked at the way her eyes darted back and forth, calculating, adjusting her story, trying to find the angle that would unlock my wallet. She was lying. She was lying with the same ease that she breathed. Blackwood, I said without looking away from her. The lights, please. Blackwood moved to the wall panel. He pressed a button. The sheer automatic blinds descended over the floor-to-ceiling windows, blocking out the Atlanta skyline. The room plunged into a semi-darkness illuminated only by the soft, recessed lighting. Then Blackwood pressed another button. A large screen descended from the ceiling on the far wall. A projector hummed to life, casting a bright white rectangle onto the screen. Paige stopped crying. She looked at the screen. Trey looked up from his hands. Bob and Joyce Henderson squinted in the dim light. "I think it is time we discuss the cost of your love," I said. Blackwood tapped his tablet. The first image appeared on the screen. It was a spreadsheet. A simple list of transactions from the last 12 months. It was titled Supplemental Credit Card Ending in 4492. User Paige Montgomery. Paige let out a small gasp. "Let us look at what was best for me," I said, pointing my fork at the screen. "Last year alone, you spent $150,000 on handbags and shoes. Hermes, Chanel, Louis Vuitton. You charged them to the card I gave Trey for emergencies. It was for networking," Paige stammered, standing up slowly. "I have to look the part. For Trey career. I have to impress the clients' wives." $150,000, I said. "That is 3 times the average household income in this country. You spent it on leather sacks to carry your lipstick. And yet when I asked to keep my vinyl records in the garage, you told me I had to pay $1,200 a month rent. You told me I was a burden." I looked at her. "You were wearing a $6,000 jacket when you threw my wife records in the mud, Paige. A jacket I paid for." Trey looked at the screen. He looked at the list of charges. He saw the dates. He saw the amounts. He looked at his wife with a mixture of horror and confusion. "You told me you bought those at the outlet," he whispered. "You told me they were fakes." "I lied," Paige hissed. "I wanted to look good for you." Blackwood tapped the tablet again. The screen changed. This time it was a scanned image of a check. A cashier check for $50,000. It was dated 6 months ago. It was made out to the Golden Horseshoe Casino. The signature at the bottom was mine. Bob Henderson made a choking sound. He grabbed his chest as if he were having a heart attack. "What is this?" Joyce asked, looking at the screen. "Bob, what is that?" I took a sip of scotch. "Your husband has a gambling problem, Joyce," I said calmly. 6 months ago he was in a hole deep enough to bury him. He owed money to people who break legs for a living. He called Trey in a panic. Trey called me. He didn't tell me it was for gambling. He told me Bob needed emergency surgery. He told me his father-in-law was dying. I looked at Bob. "I wrote the check," I said. "I didn't ask for proof. I didn't ask for a repayment plan. I just wrote the check because I thought I was saving a family member life." Bob looked at the floor, his face burning with shame. Joyce stared at him, her mouth open. "You told me you sold the boat," she whispered. "You told me you sold the boat to pay for the remodel." "I kept the boat," Bob mumbled. "I needed the money for the tables." "I saved your legs, Bob," I said. "And how did you repay me? You came into my house. You took my bedroom. You called me a gardener. You laughed at my wooden truck. You treated the man who saved your life like a servant." I didn't know it was you," Bob stammered. "Trey gave me the check. I thought Trey paid it." "Trey doesn't have $50,000, I said. "Trey doesn't have $50. Blackwood tapped the tablet a third time. This was the slide that broke the room. It was a series of emails. Emails between myself and the managing partners of the firm where Trey worked, or used to work. The subject line read, "Partnership Buy-in Donation." The amount was $200,000. Trey stood up. He walked toward the screen. He touched the projected image, his hand trembling against the light. "What is this?" he asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "You were not promoted because you were a top performer, Trey," I said. My voice was heavy with the weight of the truth. "You were promoted because I made a strategic donation to the firm capital fund. I bought your title, Trey. I bought your office. I bought the respect you thought you earned." Trey turned around. He looked at me. His eyes were wide, filled with the shattering of his own ego. "You bought it," he said. "All of it." "You were struggling," I said. "Your numbers were low. They were going to let you go 3 years ago. You came to me crying, saying you just needed a break. You said the politics were against you, so I changed the politics. I bought your way in. I thought if I gave you the position, you would grow into it. I thought you would step up." I shook my head. "But you didn't step up, Trey. You just stepped on me." I gestured to Blackwood. He tapped the final slide. It was a summary, a grand total. Mortgage payments, car leases, credit card bills, gambling debts, career buy-ins, Tuition for Page, useless master degree in art history, vacation rentals. The number at the bottom was in bold red font. $5,400,000. That is the total, I said. That is what you have cost me in the last 10 years. $5 million. The room was silent. The number hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. $5 million. It was a fortune. It was a lottery win, and they had burned through it living a life they hadn't earned. I stood up. I walked over to the window and hit the button. The blinds rose, letting the blinding afternoon sun flood back into the room. They all flinched, shielding their eyes like vampires exposed to the dawn. I don't care about the money, I said. My voice was low, but it filled the room. I have plenty of money. I can make $5 million again. I know how to work. I know how to build. I walked over to Paige. She was still on the floor, but she wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at the number on the screen, her face blank with shock. I don't care about the cash, I repeated. I care about the return on investment. I looked at Trey. I invested in you, Trey. I invested my life in you. I worked double shifts. I drove routes that no one else wanted. I missed birthdays. I missed holidays. I did it all so I could build something for you, so you wouldn't have to struggle. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. And what did I get for my investment? Did I get a son who respects me? Did I get a daughter-in-law who cares for me? Did I get a family that values me? No, I got a garage. I pointed at the door. I got a cold, damp garage and a lease agreement for $1,200 a month. I got called old man. I got treated like a stain on the carpet. I looked at Paige. Her eyes met mine. You said you only wanted what was best for me. I said, my voice dripping with ice. You said you wanted to put me in a home for my safety. I leaned down close to her face. You wanted to put me in a home because you thought I was useless. You thought I was tapped out. You thought you had squeezed every drop of blood from the stone, and now you wanted to throw the stone away. I straightened up. Well, the stone is still here, Paige, and it is the only thing holding you up. I turned to Blackwood. Turn it off, I said. The projector died. The screen went white, then retracted into the ceiling. I walked back to my chair. I sat down. I picked up my knife and fork. You lived on my blood, I said, cutting another piece of steak. You drank my sweat and you ate my labor, and you looked me in the eye and called me garbage. I put the meat in my mouth. I chewed. I swallowed. I am not a vengeful man, I said, but I am a businessman, and this is a bad deal. I am liquidating the asset. Trey stepped forward. Dad, please. We can change. I can change. I will pay it back. I will work. I will do anything. You can't pay it back, Trey, I said. You don't have a job. You don't have a car. You don't have a house. You have nothing but the suit on your back, and I paid for that too. I will get a job, he said, desperate. I will work at the warehouse. I will drive a truck. I will start at the bottom. Just give me a chance. I looked at him. I saw the fear, but I also saw the weakness. He wasn't asking for a job because he wanted to work. He was asking because he wanted to stay near the money. He wanted to get back on the payroll. I have drivers who have been with me for 20 years, I said. Men with families, men with mortgages, men with honor. They work hard. They respect the equipment. They respect the company. Do you think I would insult them by putting you in a cab next to them? You who threw my tools in the dirt. You who let your wife push me down. No, Trey. You are not a truck driver. You are not a Montgomery. You are just a man who lost his winning lottery ticket. I looked at Paige. She had pulled herself up onto a chair. She looked small, defeated. And you, I said, you wanted a pool house. You wanted a sauna. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was the lease agreement she had given me, the one asking for $1,200. I smoothed it out on the table. I took a gold pen from my pocket. I wrote something on the bottom. I slid it across the table toward her. Here is my counteroffer, I said. She looked at it. It read $0. Get out. You have nothing left here, I said. The show is over, the curtain has fallen, and you are standing on the stage naked. I waved my hand at the door. Go, I said, before I charge you for the air conditioning. They stood there for a moment, a tableau of ruin. Bob and Joyce looking at their shoes, Paige staring at the lease, Trey looking at me with eyes that were finally truly empty. Then slowly they began to move. They turned. They walked toward the elevator. They looked like ghosts fading into the mist. They were gone. I sat alone in the penthouse. The music played. The The city lights twinkled. I was rich. I was powerful. I was right. But as I looked at the empty room, I realized something. I was also an orphan. I had lost my parents years ago, and today I had lost my child. I took a sip of the scotch. It tasted bitter, but it was better than the taste of their lies. The elevator doors were about to slide shut, sealing away the image of my ruined family when I spoke one last time. "Wait," I said. My voice was not loud, but it commanded the room like a gavel strike. Blackwood reached out and pressed his hand against the sensor. The doors bounced back open. The four of them huddled inside looked out at me with a mixture of terror and pathetic hope. They looked like drowning rats who had just spotted a piece of driftwood. I stood up from the table and walked slowly toward them, holding a single sheet of paper in my hand. It was a standard document, something Blackwood kept on file for termination of contracts, but in this moment it was a sword. I stopped a few feet away from the elevator threshold. I looked at Trey. He was shaking. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. He looked at the paper in my hand as if it were a ticket to heaven. "Trey," I said, keeping my eyes locked on his. "I am a businessman, and in business we sometimes offer a chance for rehabilitation, a chance to mitigate losses." Trey stepped out of the elevator. He moved toward me, leaving his wife and in-laws behind. "Dad," he whispered, "anything. I will do anything. Just tell me." I held up the paper. "This is a job offer," I said. "It is not an executive position. It is not a management role. It is a driving position. Long-haul routes, weeks away from home, sleeping in a cab, eating at truck stops. It pays $20 an hour. It is hard work, Trey. It is the work that built this family. I will take it," Trey said immediately, nodding his head so fast I thought it might snap off. "I will take it, Dad. I can drive. I can work hard. I want to work." I raised a hand, stopping him. "There is a condition," I said, "a non-negotiable condition." I looked past him at Paige. She was watching us. Her breath held her hands clutching her purse. She thought this was her salvation too. She thought that if Trey got a job, any job, she could claw her way back in. She thought $20 an hour was better than zero. "The condition is liability," I said. "When a driver crashes a truck, we fire the driver. But we also examine the cause. We examine what distracted him, what impaired his judgment." I pointed at Paige. "She is the liability, Trey. She is the distraction. She is the poison in the well." Trey looked back at his wife. Paige's eyes widened. She shook her head slightly, a silent plea. "If you want this job," I continued, my voice hard as granite, "you have to cut the liability. You have to divorce her. You have to sign a statement declaring that she manipulated you into defrauding the company. You have to leave her with nothing. No alimony, no settlement. Just the clothes on her back." I extended the paper toward him. "Choose Trey. You can walk out of here with your wife and $0, or you can stay here with a job and a father, but without her. It is a one-time offer. It expires in 10 seconds. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. The city noise outside was a distant murmur. All eyes were on Trey. Paige took a step forward. "Trey," she whispered. "Honey, he is bluffing. He is just trying to hurt us. We are a team. We are going to get through this together. Don't listen to him." Trey looked at Paige. He looked at her designer dress, now stained and wrinkled. He looked at her desperate face. He looked at the woman who had demanded the pool house, the woman who had pushed his father. Then he looked at me. He looked at the suit. He looked at the penthouse. He looked at the safety I represented. I saw the calculation happen in his eyes. It wasn't love. It wasn't loyalty. It was survival instinct in its ugliest form. "I agree," Trey said. Paige let out a sound like a wounded animal. "What?" "It was her," Trey said, his voice rising in pitch, becoming hysterical. "Dad, it was all her. She made me do it. She wanted the house. She wanted the clothes. I told her we couldn't afford it. I told her we should be nice to you. She forced me. She threatened to leave me if I didn't get the money. She is the reason I did it. She is the poison." He grabbed the paper from my hand. "I will sign it. Give me a pen. I will divorce her right now. I never want to see her again. She ruined my life." He looked at me, pleading for approval, pleading for the pat on the head he had been chasing his whole life. "See, Dad," he said, "I am choosing you. I am choosing the family. Get rid of her. I don't care. Just let me stay." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't tense. It was horrified. Paige stood there for a second, her mouth open, her brain trying to comprehend the knife that had just been buried in her back. Then she snapped. "You coward!" she screamed. She lunged out of the elevator. She didn't come for me. She went for Trey. She hit him in the chest with both fists. "You liar!" she shrieked. "You spineless worm! You told me you were rich. You told me you owned the house. You bought me the bags. You wanted to show off. You begged me to marry you." She clawed at his face. Trey stumbled back, dropping the paper, trying to shield himself. "Get off me," he yelled, pushing her away. "Dad, help me! Security!" Bob and Joyce Henderson surged forward out of the elevator. They didn't try to separate them. They joined the attack. "You useless piece of trash," Bob roared, grabbing Trey by the lapels of his ruined suit. "You ruined my daughter. You promised her a life, and you gave her nothing. You fraud." It was a brawl, a pathetic high society brawl in the middle of a penthouse suite. They were screaming, scratching, and tearing at each other. The veneer of civilization had stripped away completely, leaving only scared, greedy animals fighting over scraps. I watched them. I watched the son I had raised cower and blame his wife. I watched the daughter-in-law who had claimed to love him attack him with primal fury. It was the ugliest thing I had ever seen, and I had seen plenty of ugly things in the trucking business. "Enough," I said. I didn't shout. I didn't have to. The authority in my voice was absolute. Blackwood signaled the security guards. They stepped in efficiently, pulling Paige off Trey and shoving Bob back toward the elevator. Joyce was wailing in the corner, clutching her pearls. Trey stood up, panting, bleeding from a scratch on his cheek. He smoothed his shirt. He looked at me with a hopeful, desperate smile. He thought he had won. He thought he had passed the test. "I did it, Dad," he panted. "I told her. I am done with her. Where do I sign? When do I start driving?" I looked at him. I looked at him with a coldness that felt like the death of my own heart. "You don't," I said. Trey blinked. "What?" But you said. You said if I chose you." "I lied, Trey," I said. He froze. "I wanted to see who you really were," I said, walking closer to him until I was inches from his face. "I wanted to see if there was a shred of honor left in you. I wanted to see if you would stand by the woman you married, the woman you made vows to even when the ship was sinking." I shook my head slowly. "You sold her out for $20 an hour, Trey. You threw your wife to the wolves to save your own skin. You blamed her for your lies. You took no responsibility. But she is a liability," Trey stammered, confusion clouding his eyes. "You said she was a liability." "She is," I agreed. "She is a terrible person. But you chose her, Trey. You married her, and a man who betrays his wife for a paycheck will betray his company for a bribe. A man who has no loyalty to his own vows has no place in my trucks." I pointed to the door. "I don't hire traitors, Trey, and I certainly don't hire cowards." Trey's mouth opened and closed. The realization washed over him. It wasn't a job offer. It was a character test, and he had failed it so spectacularly that there was no coming back. "Dad," he whispered, "please. I have nothing." "You have exactly what you deserve," I said. "You have your freedom. You are free from me. You are free from the job you hated. You are free from the lies you told. Go enjoy it." I turned to the security guards. "Get them out of here," I ordered. "All of them. If they come back, call the police and press charges for trespassing and assault." "No," Paige screamed as the guard grabbed her arm. "Silas, wait. He tricked me too." Out I roared. The sound echoed off the glass walls, shaking the room. The guards dragged them back into the elevator. Bob was cursing. Joyce was sobbing. Paige was screaming threats. And Trey was silent. He just stared at me as the doors closed. He stared at the father he had underestimated, the father he had used, the father he had finally lost. The doors shut. The chime sounded. The light above the elevator indicated they were going down. Down to the lobby, down to the street, down to the bottom. The room was suddenly very quiet. Blackwood stood by the wall, adjusting his cuffs. He looked unruffled, as if he hadn't just witnessed the implosion of a family. "Shall I have housekeeping come up, sir?" he asked. "There is some disorder." "In a moment, Blackwood," I said. I walked over to the stereo system. I pressed a button. The jazz music returned. Miles Davis again. The trumpet notes floated through the air, melancholic and pure. They cleansed the room of the screaming and the lies. I walked to the window. I looked out at the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and red. It was beautiful. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small framed photo of B, the one I had saved from the garage. I placed it on the dining table right next to the empty glass of scotch. We did it. B, I whispered to the photo. We cleaned house. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was hot and salty. It was a tear for Trey, for the boy he used to be, for the man he never became. But as I wiped it away, I felt something else. I felt light. The weight of their expectations, the weight of their disdain, it was gone. I sat down in the leather armchair facing the view. I closed my eyes and let the music wash over me. I was alone. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't lonely. I was just free. It has been exactly 365 days since the elevator doors closed on my family. A year is a long time. Long enough for the earth to circle the sun and long enough for a man to rebuild his world from the ashes of betrayal. I stood on the sidewalk in downtown Atlanta, the morning air crisp and cool against my face. Behind me rose a beautiful red brick building, its windows gleaming in the sunlight. Above the double doors, polished brass letters spelled out the name I had carried in my heart for 40 years, the B. Montgomery Arts Center. Inside, I could hear the faint sound of a saxophone warming up. It was a jagged, soulful sound full of promise. Today was the grand opening. This building used to be a derelict warehouse on the edge of the district. I bought it, I gutted it, and I turned it into a sanctuary. A place where kids from the neighborhoods I grew up in could come and learn that their voices mattered. A place where they could pick up a trumpet or a paintbrush or a pen and create something beautiful without worrying about the cost. It was free, all of it. The lessons, the instruments, the meals we served in the cafeteria. It was the legacy B would have wanted. It was the legacy she deserved. I adjusted my tie in the reflection of the glass door. I looked good. The lines on my face were still there, etched deep by time and sorrow, but the heaviness was gone. I stood tall. I stood proud. But before I went inside to cut the ribbon and shake the hands of the mayor and the city council members, I took a moment to look at the report Blackwood had handed me earlier that morning. It was a single sheet of paper, a status update on the assets I had liquidated a year ago. The first paragraph detailed the current status of Ms. Paige Henderson. She was no longer Montgomery. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, uncontested and brutal. I closed my eyes and I could see her. Not the woman in the silk robe drinking wine at noon, but the woman she was now. She was working the register at a discount grocery store in a strip mall off the highway. I knew because I had sent Blackwood to check. She spent her days scanning coupons and bagging frozen dinners for people who looked through her as if she were made of glass. Her hands, the ones that used to be perfectly manicured, were now dry and cracked from handling cardboard boxes and counting dirty change. She lived in a studio apartment above a laundromat, a place that smelled of other people's detergent and stale cooking oil. She had no car. She took the bus. The same bus she used to laugh at when she saw domestic workers waiting at the stop. I wondered if she thought about the pool house she wanted to build. I wondered if she thought about the Italian leather sofa. I wondered if she remembered the sound of my vinyl records cracking under her feet in the mud. The report said she had tried to sell her engagement ring but found out it was a cubic zirconia replica Trey had bought to save money while telling her it was a diamond. That must have been a particularly bitter pill to swallow. A fake diamond for a fake life. I folded the paper and looked at the next section. Trey. My son. The boy I had named after my own father. He was driving a delivery van for a parcel service, not one of my trucks. He would never sit behind the wheel of a Montgomery rig. He worked for a third-rate courier company driving a beat-up van with no air conditioning, delivering packages to the same gated communities where he used to pretend he belonged. He was living in a rented room in a house shared with 3 other men. He had gained weight. His hair was thinning. The stress of $5 million in debt had aged him 10 years in one. The report noted that Bob and Joyce Henderson had cut him off completely. After the divorce, they had blamed him for everything. They called him a fraud, a loser, a con artist who had tricked their daughter. They didn't see their own greed. They only saw his failure to deliver the lifestyle they felt entitled to. They had moved back to Florida to a small rental trailer, having lost their condo to foreclosure. They spent their days posting angry rants on social media about how the rich elite had ruined them, never once admitting that they had tried to ruin the rich elite first. Trey had tried to call me once about 3 months ago. It was late, and I was sitting in my study listening to Coltrane. I saw his number on the caller ID. I let it ring. I listened to the voicemail. It was just him breathing heavy and jagged as if he were crying or maybe just exhausted. He didn't say anything. He just breathed for 30 seconds and then hung up. I didn't call back. I deleted the message. I had already given him his chance. I had given him a lifetime of chances. I put the report back in my pocket. I didn't feel joy at their suffering. I wasn't a sadist, but I felt a profound sense of balance. The scales had tipped wildly in their favor for years, fueled by my blindness and my money. Now gravity had done its work. They were exactly where they belonged. They were living the lives they had earned. I turned away from the street and looked toward the parking lot. A young man was walking toward me carrying a clipboard and wearing a suit that was slightly too big for him but pressed with military precision. He walked with a slight limp, a souvenir from a childhood injury that hadn't healed right because his family couldn't afford the physical therapy. His name was Jameson. I had met Jameson 5 years ago at a small mechanic shop on the south side. Back when I was playing the role of the retired gardener, I used to take my old Ford truck there for oil changes. Jameson was the junior mechanic. He was 22, then quiet and diligent. He didn't know who I was. He just saw an old man who loved his truck. One day I was short on cash. I had left my wallet at home and only had $20 on me. The bill was $40. The owner of the shop, a man with a hard heart, was about to tell me to leave the truck until I came back with the money. Jameson had stepped in. "It is okay, boss," he had said, wiping grease from his hands. "I got it. Mr. Silas is good for it. And even if he isn't, I will cover the rest." He paid the $20 out of his own pocket. It was half his daily wage. He didn't do it for a favor. He didn't do it because he thought I was a secret millionaire. He did it because he saw an old man in a tight spot and he had respect. I paid him back the next day, of course, but I never forgot. I started watching him. I saw how he treated the customers. I saw how he stayed late to fix a single mother's car so she could get to work in the morning. I saw the integrity that lived in his bones. When the dust settled with Trey, I went back to that shop. I didn't bring the Ford. I brought the Maybach. I walked in wearing my suit. Jameson didn't recognize me at first. When he did, his eyes went wide. "Mr. Silas," he had stammered. You cleaned up nice. I bought the shop, Jameson," I had told him, "and I am closing it down." He looked devastated. He thought I was there to fire him. "I am closing it down because I need a director of operations for a new division of Montgomery Logistics," I had said. "It pays 6 figures. It comes with stock options, and it requires a man who knows how to fix things that are broken." He had cried. He had actually cried standing there in his greasy coveralls. Now Jameson stood beside me in front of the Arts Center. He was the director of the foundation. He ran the logistics of the charity, ensuring that every dollar went to the kids who needed it. He treated the money with a reverence that Trey never possessed. "Everything is ready," Sir Jameson said, handing me a pair of large ceremonial scissors. "The press is inside, the kids are seated, the band is ready to play." "Thank you, Jameson," I said, taking the scissors. "You did a good job on the logistics for the opening. The catering setup is flawless." "Thank you, sir," he said, beaming. "I learned from the best." I looked at him. He wasn't my blood. He didn't have my eyes or my nose, but he had my heart. He had the values that I had tried and failed to instill in my own son. "Jameson," I said, turning to face him fully, "I have been thinking. Yes, sir, I am 71 years old. I can't be the chairman forever. I need to start thinking about the next 20 years. Jameson nodded slowly. "Of course, sir. We can start looking for a successor, someone with experience in international shipping, maybe someone from FedEx or UPS. I shook my head. No. I don't want an MBA from Harvard who knows how to strip assets. I want someone who knows what it feels like to have grease under their fingernails. I want someone who knows the value of $20. I put a hand on his shoulder. "I want you to start attending the board meetings, Jameson, not as the foundation director, as my executive assistant. I want you to learn the business, all of it, from the dispatch radio to the boardroom table." Jameson froze. "Sir, I am just a mechanic. I don't know how to run a multinational corporation. You know people, I said. You know respect. You know hard work. The rest is just spreadsheets, and I can teach you spreadsheets. I can't teach character. You already have that. He looked at me, his eyes shining. Sir, are you saying? I am saying that family isn't about blood, Jameson. It is about loyalty. It is about who stands next to you when the engine breaks down and it is raining. You stood by me when I was nobody. Now I want you to stand by me when I am somebody. Are you ready to take the wheel, son? He swallowed hard. He straightened his shoulders. He looked at the building behind us. Then he looked at me. I am ready, Mr. Silas. I won't let you down. I know you won't, I said. I turned back to the glass doors. Through them I could see the faces of the children waiting. They were holding trumpets and violins. They were eager. They were hungry for a chance. I thought about Trey one last time. I thought about him driving his van delivering packages he would never own. I hoped that maybe, just maybe, the hard work was teaching him something. I hoped that the silence of his empty life was finally allowing him to hear the truth. But that was his journey now, not mine. My journey was here, with the music. With the future I was building with my own hands and the hands of the people who deserved it. I gripped the scissors. I looked at Jameson. Let's go inside, I said. There is work to do. We walked through the doors together. The sound of the saxophone swelled, greeting us like an old friend. The flashbulbs popped. The applause began. I walked to the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I didn't see dollar signs. I didn't see status. I saw potential. Respect, I thought. As I leaned into the mic, my voice steady and strong cannot be bought with money. It cannot be inherited. It cannot be stolen. It is bought with character. It is bought with action. And now finally, I am investing in the right place. I smiled. Welcome everyone, I said. Let's make some music. In the end, I learned that the heaviest burden wasn't the poverty I escaped in my youth, but the wealth that blinded my own family. They looked at a man in flannel and saw a servant, while Jameson looked at the same man and saw a human being worthy of respect. That simple difference cost my son a fortune and earned a mechanic an empire. True legacy isn't about what you leave in your will, but what you leave in people's hearts. Remember, if you have to buy respect, you can't afford it. And if you have to demand loyalty, you simply don't deserve it. If you believe character matters more than cash, hit that like button and tell me in the comments. Did Trey deserve a second chance, or was justice finally served?